welcome back, YouTube. We're going to be picking up where we left off with some Survivor Man Challenge, which is this one. And basically what we've got going on Survivor Man Challenge, for those who haven't seen this before, so Farming Simulator 22 is a game that is a simulation-style game where you farm. Pretty straightforward in that regard. But normally you start with a bunch of money to buy a bunch of equipment, and you grow your farm with having a lot to work with. Now, the issue you run into with the Survivor Man Challenge is you start with a chainsaw, $0. You're not allowed to lease anything. You're not allowed to take loans. You do give yourself a plot of land just because mechanically how the game works. You're not allowed to farm or cut down trees on land you don't own, so you have to own a tile of land. So most times when you see people doing any type of Survivor challenge, they'll either give themselves the value of a tile of land or a tile of land to start. The only luxury we gave ourselves is we did give ourselves this bus, so that we can sleep, which just fast forwards time. And where's my truck? Oh, it's right there. And we gave ourselves this truck, and that way when I went to, and the chainsaw, that way when I went to cut down trees, you didn't have to watch me take one piece of tree all the way to the sell point that's like back. You can barely see it right there. You probably can't see it very well on your end. But where I have my icon, behind those trees where the sell point is. Needless to say, if you had to sit there and watch me carry a 2-meter long piece of log, kind of at the max, one at a time each and every tree, for literally 8 or 9 streams or something like that, is how long that'd probably take. It would have been a good time. So I got the truck that way I could huck them all in the back of the truck, and while that was still a bit on the laborious side, it at least was reasonable. Now, where we're at right now is we are in our harvest season. So I've got all of these fields over here. I mean, there's 4 of them here, but we're down to just like 1 1/3. They're wheat. So we are harvesting our wheat to put into our granary to take over to our bakery as flour to make into bread. You get the whole idea. We are working on that. And at the same time this is happening, I have my other vehicle, which is picking up all of this straw we've got laying on the ground. Because all straw really is it's like wheat, barley, your grains. It's the stems. So we're picking that up as a way of supplementing our income. It doesn't give us that much money, but, when you can barely afford to operate day by day, getting an extra couple $1,000 is pretty good. Alright. Yeah, so when we started, I started with just the chainsaw and the truck, as far as things to use. We did clear an entire hill of all of its trees and sold them, got ourselves a couple of greenhouses. And then between the greenhouses and everything we've got going on, we managed to expand into a second tile, got ourselves some field set up to start growing things, then, expanded that. Using that money, we managed to buy ourselves a granary. Using that money, we made ourselves a bakery. And we very recently, literally like 2 streams ago, acquired the really big sorghum field. We got that tile, and we put the sorghum in there. And if you're curious why I'm growing wheat and sorghum, I'm growing wheat because it is one of the most efficient types of crops for making flour, for making bread. And then sorghum is also for making flour and for making bread. And the reason why we're using that, even though wheat is more efficient, is right now with the growing season and my equipment at hand, I really kind of push what I can fit into one in-game day, like kind of push my limit with just the wheat. So if I were to stack another large field of wheat in there, I just wouldn't get through it all. I'd have crops still laying on the ground and rotting and whatnot. So instead what we're doing is I'm doing sorghum because its grow season's slightly off of what wheat is. So that I have, instead of doing all of my work one day and then we sleep for 2 days, and then we do all of our work and then we sleep for like 6 days, and then we're selling stuff in between where... But for the most part, just not even having to put the work in anymore. By having it, it's now I go work, work, work. Okay, now we rest a day. Work, work, work. Okay, now I have like 2-3 days of rest. So we're kind of balancing out our load a lot more. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. That's all been going pretty good. But yeah, so right now I've got, a worker who's operating our harvester for us. They charge us through the nose. You can just look at our money in the top right as it slowly ticks down as they do their work. So each one of these fields ends up costing me, by the time the work is all said and done, at least a couple $100 to $1,000 that they just gobble up of our profit margin. But without them, I couldn't get the work done in time, so it's just an investment I pay. But the immediate priorities right now of things I'd like to do is we're at the point, since I just did the expansion, I want to try and get all of the money we can towards trying to set up another, or not set up another production line, that's a lie. Trying to take the equipment we have and improving on it. On that list, some of the big names on there is I have a tractor that needs to be replaced. That it's one we've had for 10 in-game years, and they do have a mechanic in the game that the longer or the more hours you have on a tractor, or on any equipment, the faster it accrues repairs. And it is becoming a financial burden for me to keep that thing running. That it's costing me $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 or more every year just to keep the thing able to keep working. So that's a problem. I want to replace the harvester we have to get one that's bigger, more storage, bigger header, so it takes less time to go through harvesting the fields. Because we are starting to kind of hit the limit on what I could get done in the day with the harvester I do have. So that's another one on there. And I want to get a large cultivator and a large sprayer. Because right now I'm doing the fertilizer with the solid fertilizing machine, which is fine. Like, it works well enough. But the issue is I have to use a plow to deal with my fields. And that works, but the AI is really bad at the plow, and it's also a lot slower. So what we want to do is turn around and get ourselves a cultivator, because you can go way faster than those. But the negative of the cultivator is you will get weeds, so I need the sprayer to deal with the weeds on the other side. The sprayers are also way, way, way faster than the solid fertilizer, though they are more expensive, so I could go way faster with that as well. So that's kind of the name of the game with all of this stuff, is we're trying to make it so I can do all of my work a bit faster, because that will make it so I could sit there and get more done in some of these other fields. Yeah, so this is our granary right here. So we just drop in all of our wheat into here, it gets taken in, and it gets made into other materials. The moment we switched to Farm Sim on the TikTok side, I got the warning, live, age restricted, your content may not be suitable for young audiences and has been age restricted. I'm pretty sure there is someone who is tuning into this channel regularly who likes some of the content I play, but does not like Farm Sim, which, you know, fair enough, that part's fine. And unfortunately, the reality of how things work over on the TikTok side, people can just report you for anything, and a lot of times it's just automated. So it's super annoying. Because clearly something I've done during the segment of the stream, the segment we've been in for like 10 minutes, where we've been, you know, harvesting wheat, is very clearly not okay. That we definitely don't want to expose children to it. And I wouldn't care too much about it being age restricted, because, like, I don't really monetize over there or whatever. Not a meaningful level, it doesn't do anything. But it's just, it's the very fact that, like, someone is taking the time to do that. Like, look, man, here, you want me to help you out. If you don't enjoy Farm Sim to the point that you're going to, like, report the channel, go away. I don't want you here. It's fine if you don't enjoy it, but you want to support. I appreciate that. It's fine if you're going to go tune into another channel. I totally, support that as well. It makes sense. You're here for entertainment. If I'm not providing what you're looking for, then, you're not getting what you're here for. But like the reporting of the channel, it's like, man, you got nothing better to do with your life. That said, because it has absolutely collapsed the numbers over there on TikTok, where I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna go ahead and restart the stream. I'm going to go ahead and do this, which is I'm going to go, hey, over there on TikTok, if you're still there, it's about to reset, because that's the thing they recommend you do, so I'm going to do it. It's just weirdly what you do on TikTok is just in the middle of your stream, you're just supposed to, like, reset it to build viewership, because their algorithm favors channels that just started stream. It's so dumb. And Pierre going, oh lord, exposing children to the horrors of seeing how wheat is harvested so they can understand where their food comes from. How dare you? Especially, like, I could get it if it was something like, you know, oh, like, let's dig into, you know, how meat happens. It's like, okay, I could see that. I could see someone making the arguments like, yeah, if you like took the camera into a slaughterhouse to see animals die, sure, that I could definitely argue that may not be appropriate for children. I could see arguments where it's like, hey, it's where food comes from, it's just reality. But you know what? I would understand that. I'm like, yeah, you know what? Animals dying kind of sucks. Oh, yeah, yeah, so I'm not super duper strict on language, but generally speaking, like, a lot of stuff that gets auto mod, if it's very clearly, so like, if someone says something that's like, you know, it's straight up negative, so it's not even like, you know, derogatory or whatever, but it's like, it's a negative thing, and auto mod grabs it, a lot of times I will leave it there. Just the same as, like, if someone drops, like, 8 or 9 curse words in a sentence and automod grabs it, I'll usually leave it there as well. It's not that people aren't allowed to curse. The place I try to describe it is I like to keep the channel in the gray area of safe for work. And what I mean by that is, I'm okay if the boss raises an eyebrow. I'm not okay if the boss goes, alright, I gotta go talk to this person. But yeah, so it's like, I don't have a problem with, like, you know, the occasional swearing and all that, but if someone starts, like, really get over the top, it's like, hey, man, you know, tone it down a notch. Yeah, no, I saw. You're fine. Like, it's one of those things that, like, I get that, and I don't necessarily disagree with the mentality kind of thing. Yeah. You're saying, so farms are horrible, but okay, kiddos. Today we're going to learn the entire process of making medical grade. I think it entirely... So, a lot of platforms, they will have some level of automation occurring. Like, just out of necessity. They don't have enough people, and I don't think they could afford or realistically manage to have enough people to properly moderate everything, so they do depend on user-submitted reports. And where some of the platforms do better than others, none of them are perfect. But I have found TikTok to be the outlier for just, someone reported this, flag it. And I've been fortunate that the only thing I've been flagged for is, again, for whatever reason, very specifically farm sim, is it's been getting flagged for being inappropriate for children. And it's not every day or anything like that. So I do suspect it's usually right at the beginning when it happens. And that's whether or not I switch categories too. So to me it is definitely, I would assume, there's probably someone on that end of the fence who doesn't like farm sim. Which again, totally fair. But doesn't like farm sim and gets upset whenever I switch to it. And so flags it and then leaves. And honestly, they can go away. But if you have a bunch of content that your people are not consuming, or people decide not to flag for whatever reason, then it goes mostly undetected. That's actually the thing that scares me with the big change going on right now with, for those who didn't hear, Twitch is going to have a significant reduction in staff rumor is as early as tomorrow, but it has been confirmed that they are cutting a third of their staff. We just don't know when or who. That it does make me worry that we're going to have more moderation problems on the platform, because I don't know what department they're coming from, but we'll see. Upper says, I feel you, man. You got railed for explaining what a Jacob's break is and how it works. Interesting. It's weird since, well, that's the thing. The people reporting it, they're reporting it and there's no consequence for them misreporting. Not a real consequence. That's my grievance on that end over there. I get false reports are going to happen, period. But they either need to do the thing that when someone false reports, they get like a mark against their account, and too many false reports that they just immediately just chuck it in the bin. Like your reports, they don't even tell you they're not being accepted anymore. You just report, it just goes in the garbage if you're false reporting constantly. Or they need to change it where the false reports don't automatically trigger anything. Yeah, I know I saw the harvester is full. I'm just gonna wait till this line's done. I know the employee is still charging me by the hour. Which is, did they just push a massive product? If it's anything like the rest of the industry, the devs? So they are in the process of doing a beta that will allow us as creators to, one, we can encode on our local machines, and a bunch of people are up in arms around that, misunderstanding why that matters or is relevant or whatever. There's a whole bunch of people who are like, oh no, they're going to let us encode on our own machine so we can support a bunch of different things. That's something Twitch already does for us. Very clearly, Twitch is going to stop encoding for us and we'll have to encode our own things. And, you know, who knows, maybe eventually that does happen. But that's not what's happening right now. What's happening right now is if you are not a partnered content creator, you get no guarantee that you get like any encoding outside of like the 1 or 2 sets. And so it is a big deal that affiliates and all that kind of stuff, you know, affiliate kind of thing, you know, one of those things that they don't necessarily get the encoding. So they have the option, if Twitch won't pay to give them the encoding because they're affiliate, they're not partnered, they can opt in to say, I am going to encode this. It's also going to be a thing that we can encode at a higher, you know, rendering than Twitch currently offers to give you higher resolution and all that. Which again, might be worth it for me doing. Like, that's the whole thing. But yeah. So it is one of those things that's like, okay, it's in the current form a beneficial thing. Like there's no negative. They're also going to add support for the AV1 format, which all you need to know about that is a much better encoding than we currently have available on Twitch. That gives support for that, so you'll get higher resolutions at lower amount of bandwidth and lower performance implications on the content creator. So win-win-win. And you know the whole thing. Yeah, no, and I get that, Pure. That's actually, so when people use the R word on the channel to not be talking about like a certain mechanical thing, you know, I am someone who will absolutely be like, absolutely not. And that's a whole thing. But at the same time, I'm playing a farming game. We play American Truck Simulator. It's like, it is a mechanical thing. Within that context, it's fine. Now, if it's very obviously, like, people are just, like, saying, like, we're playing a completely other, like, we're playing RimWorld or something, and someone just starts trying to strike a conversation about the mechanical part, it's like, alright, come on, man. It's like, I see what's happening here. It's not relevant. It's not anything. Yeah, no, but I could I could still, so like to be entirely honest, if I am playing RimWorld and there's not a conversation happening around the mechanical part, or there's other places that term is used to describe an actual function, like a mechanical or electrical thing, and we're just playing RimWorld and someone starts dropping, did you hear about this part in your car? It does X, Y, and Z. And they're, dropping the R word. I'm like, look, man, no. It's like, it's not relevant to this conversation, and it's like you've gone out of your way to get to it. Now, I'm not saying that's what you're doing here, but like if it was just out of context kind of thing, that's a whole stuff. But if it is, I'm playing American Truck Simulator, and they say, hey, have you tried turning that on? I'd be like, oh, right, I should turn that on. Like, that's fine. Now, obviously, even still, when we're talking about the mechanical thing, I do deliberately avoid saying the word anyways, because people will clip you out of context and then report you because they're sad that you're switched to Farm Simulator and they don't want to see that, or, I don't know, people just like to be awful. So as a creator, I have to be somewhat mindful about what does and doesn't get clipped in what contexts and all that. Because that happens plenty where you have someone, they say a sentence, usually they're being sarcastic, but they say a sentence, it gets clipped out of context, and out of context, it seems super awful. But then when you get the rest of the sentence, you're like, oh wait, never mind. Like, they were actually, the thing that they were supposedly doing wrong, they were actually literally doing the opposite. That does happen. But that's the reason why you need human moderators involved in your processes. RimWorld has a lot. Yeah. RimWorld also encourages a lot of that behavior. Not in anything it does within itself, but because of topics it is willing to include in its game, it does invite a whole lot of people to just be really trolly. And for those who don't know, Allison Adventures is another excellent content creator on the platform. Plays a lot of Project Zomboid, so if you're looking for that, you can find that over there. Good times to be had. Like a lot. They do clean things out of context with Longy, but they were not harassment. Yeah, like that's the thing. If you're clipping someone out of context, that's just like funny. Like there's times where I'll have clips about, complaining about trees or whatever. That, in just like in that little frame. Be like, what's this dude's problem with trees? Like, no, seriously. And it'll be, I'm complaining about the zombies walking through the trees in Project Zomboid and grabbing you kind of thing. So it's like, you had like a near call, you almost died in Project Zomboid because trees, so you'd be complaining about the way the trees work. But out of context, it's like, man, this person just really has a weird issue with trees. Like, what's their deal? Those tree zombies dangerous. Oh yeah, they are. They have killed many a person in Project Zomboid. Even some of the veteran players who do marathon runs, they have died. I think was that with Cheese. Cheese had his two characters. He got over 100-something thousand, and I think one of them wasn't that how the one died on the way to the secret military base. It was a zombie popping through a tree, which is the reason why I find that place super dangerous. Like to this day, I'll have people argue with me, but I'm like, nah, to me there's no more dangerous place on the entire map than that dirt road with all the trees along it to the secret military base. You wait until those trees grow in at all, like you don't go there right away in the early run. Oh, that place gets gnarly. Like, don't get me wrong, the prison and Louisville and all that are, like, in-your-face dangerous. But doing the route to the secret military base is just, how would you like to just have stress for hour after hour after hour after hour trying to go down that road? And on 16 times pop, it's like you're spending literal in-game months clearing the zombies down that road. And the whole time, you're just completely adrenalined out because you're just watching your own shadow everywhere. You're saying, but being constantly on guard and limiting your candid responses is its own insidious way, is a indirect form of censorship. You're not wrong, but at the same time, like, the frequency I need to discuss the mechanical process that happens to share a term with a derogatory term is so very close to zero that it's not a big deal. Literally, I think the only times it has come up as discussion is discussing the fact that it shares the term with the derogatory term. I don't think on stream I've ever had a reason to actually talk about it beyond someone saying, hey, you could turn that on here. And that happening only once in like 6 to 8 months. It doesn't give people that example. People freak out over everything. So I usually push back at these kind of things. And the reason I do is because you're not wrong that people get upset about stuff. The issue is for like those handful of innocent, I use this term for a correct mechanical process in a context it makes sense kind of things. There's 6 or 7 dozen people who use it in the harmful method. And so it is rare you run into it where it is being used correctly. And so you do naturally lean towards the defensive. And then on top of that, as a content creator, most of the time I run into that stuff where someone pops in and they say something like going with that way. It's almost always malicious. That they've popped in and their entire intent from the very beginning is to stir the pot. And if you take the bait, you know, they have their fun. If you don't take the bait, they escalate until, you know, you turn to ban them. And I'm not saying that's anything like you're doing or anything like that. But I will state that I'm very openly, highly in support of moderation. And I very openly do feel that there is content and things that shouldn't be permitted in channels and whatnot. What you have in your own channel and all that's your own business. But very much, if people say things that are derogatory or whatever, I will shut them down and kick them out. Like, that's my approach. Because, you know, people want to chill and have a good time and not have to deal with this crap after work or whatever. Now, I understand you're talking about the instance of a term that is shared with a derogatory term. And I get that. And my counter argument is, but how often does it actually come up? And I know you say, well, I was talking about in general, but it's like, but that's the way most of them are. Let's see, Melmer says, I remember about 10 years back at Facebook was particularly bad about flagging, even banning people using on hate speech violations because they were talking about hate speech. Yeah, that is, you do get false positives. Like, don't get me wrong, that's always going to be a thing, is you're always going to have false positives and false negatives and all those kind of things. It does suck with people like that. Some people really need to stir the pot out of boredom. Oh yeah, then we have like, I've mentioned before, when it comes to people I end up having to ban, I think I've only had to ban one long-term viewer. And it was, they were just getting completely out of hand so far as things they were saying. That's like, look, man, that's not okay. And it wasn't like they're using a term that is mixed. They were saying things that aren't appropriate. Like, not okay at all appropriate, that I do not want in the channel for chill vibe. And that whole thing. But the best description of what you heard regarding moderation from content creators is, I live here, you don't. There are many places on the internet you can go because this is my job. I'm stuck here, so I will moderate the people. Yeah, this is... The other thing is, like, some of the other ones have said, this is not a democracy. Like, this is my kingdom. This is not a democracy. I make the rules. There's also a thing that on Twitch we actually have within our streaming contract, the TOS and all that. I on this channel am obligated to obey the TOS and make sure that the audience is also obeying TOS. So where you have the channels that people talk about stuff that's very clearly not okay based on the terms of service on Twitch, if someone reports my channel as not moderating correctly, I can have my channel suspended, which means I lose my income. So I have an obligation. Could I get away with it? Probably get away with not moderating for a long time? Sure. Are there plenty of channels who are absolutely awful with it? Sure. But I choose to not do that. We were just having a conversation basically around, you know, there are terms that you can find out there that there is a appropriate use of that term and an inappropriate use of that term. that a term that in one context can be derogatory and on another context is just describing something that's like a mechanical process or whatever that's like totally valid and fair and all that kind of stuff, stuff. And I am 100% on the I moderate here. Like, if people get out of line, I will sit there and say, hey, we're not gonna do that kind of thing. But yeah, I would rather that auto mod jumps on terms in advance and doesn't let them through, and then I go, okay, that's fine, yes, we'll allow that. Versus, someone saying like something truly awful, and then it gets by, it does its harm, and then I ban. Because the whole thing is people come here for a chill vibe, to relax, have a good time, and I try to do what I can to avoid allowing people to take away from that, to steal that from them. And to be fair, it's the same thing. I'll do that similarly with like a trauma dump type situation. Like if someone says I'm having a rough day, totally fine, absolutely okay, and all that kind of stuff. But if it's those things that they're escalating, it's like, hey, like this needs to be taken, like we can have this conversation off stream kind of thing. Because I'm down to try and help people, but it's the whole thing of when people get into that headspace. Like, doing that live in front of others is likely to cause more harm for the other people who may be going through similar and just trying to escape it, than it is to benefit the individual who has come in there for help. So there's that balance. Yeah, and being proactive is better than being reactive.
What's the worst that could happen?
But yeah. Alright, I'll get that stretch here in a moment. I just need to take control of this. But as you can see, this is a perfect example right now in the game we're saying I need to get better equipment before, that's my next priority. And why we didn't plant more wheat. It's starting to get to be sundown. I haven't quite finished harvesting this field. It's getting ready to be end of the point where I'll be able to see. Well, we still harvest today. I need to get that done. But you get that. Up here it's like, great, your late brother was mentally handicapped, and you hated to hear people use the word to describe him. But you also understand every time I hear the word in conversation. I only show my ignorance for reacting to it when it wasn't used that way. Yeah, but that's kind of the whole thing, is not everyone knows that friction-based braking uses that term, or when you're trying to suppress fire, that there's a use of that term that's okay. Or that, with certain electrical systems, that there's a term that's related to that. Because one, it just doesn't come up in normal conversation. Outside of people working, like, specifically in electrical, or in dealing with, semi-trucks, or farming equipment, and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just one of those things that I can fully understand on Twitch, someone who is not in the simulation space or whatever, playing games that feature that, or not a trucker or not a farmer, reacting in that way, because it is. And you like, it's one of those things, like, yeah, you get yelled at, banned, whatever, it's like, that sucks, but you can't expect everyone to know everything. Just the same as there's people who say stuff and don't realize they're saying something awful because they don't know, like, the history of something or whatever. And you go, hey man, you shouldn't say that. Just so you know, the origin of that phrase comes from here, here, and here.
Alexa, play Despacito.
But, just the same as there's that ignorance that happens where, you say something, you're like, hey, just so you know, that phrase you just used, maybe you want to go ahead and see where that comes from and why that's on this list of, like, hate phrases. Because it doesn't mean what you think it does. The reverse also happens, where you have a word or phrase that is okay, but very much feels like it's not okay. Oh yeah, no, I know I could slow down time. More than likely, the next in-game day, I'm gonna have to slow down time because I've got that gargantuan field over there that's like literally 2/3 of an entire tile. I've got to harvest that. At the same time, I've got to plow these 2 fields and fertilize them all in the course of one day. So yeah, so the next in-game day, we're probably dropping the speed down. But I'm not too worried. We'll get that done before it's too late. No Man's Land? Yep. We started with $0, a chainsaw, and a dream. And we're up to 3 tiles. A bakery, a granary, two greenhouses over there. And doing pretty good. Yeah, No Man's Land is kind of the default if you want to make your own farm. There's definitely other good maps, like Calm Land is pretty good. My only beef with Calm Land is they've got a bunch of these like little dirt roads that are property you cannot buy, that are just like in the middle of your area sometimes. And that's my only beef with Calm Land. I like the map a whole lot. It's also not quite as interesting as this map when it comes to this one. You got all like the random one-off trees and rocks and all that you have to deal with, whereas Calm Land is just like wide open, which is better if you just, you know, want to farm. You don't want to deal with all the other stuff, but it does kind of reduce the character you get. That's also why I gave myself the bus to sleep in, because you can do without it. And there are a lot of people who will start the run with just giving themselves like a little, you know, not giving themselves, that they will go and get a mod to get like little $5,000 tent or whatever. Which, you know, the $5,000 is not that big a deal or whatever. To me, it's like, one, the 5,000 isn't that big a deal, and the alternative is all you do is just, when you're like, okay, I finished my process, you set your game to 360 times speed and you wait, because that's all you can do. You having network issues? That doesn't surprise me. There's been a lot of really nasty weather going through the area. Get a $5 doormat. So the other good news is I don't actually have to get all this straw picked up today either. The only thing I really need to get done today is finish harvesting, which I'll probably have that. We'll have one more drop-off, and then I'll have like one more go. I don't even have to get the last drop-off done, just get it moved. And I know I can save the straw and get more money with it. The problem I have right now is I can't afford a silo. It's 100,000-ish. And so I could spend the money and get it, and then get more money from our straw, which would do a lot of work. But the issue with that being is that's 100,000 I'm going to put on other things, and it still wouldn't give me that much more money. And the other way I could save is just dump it on the ground in our map, which we did that the first year, and I do get a decent bit more money, like 50% more money or so. But the big problem with that is then I have to like pick it up, put it down, and pick it up kind of thing. That for the couple of $1,000 extra of money it makes me, it is a lot of labor I'd rather just not do. You're saying you play Rogue River logging map on Farm Sim 19. Just switched to Farm Sim 22 and is really sad about the Rogue River Farm Sim 22. It's horrible. Do you have any mods? !mods. The only mods I'm currently running is the map itself, No Man's Land, which I need to get added to that command. I keep forgetting. And then the other mod is I do have the Universal Auto Loader mod, just because I'm not interested in playing Forklift Simulator 22. Like, it's fine early game to do the forklift, but there is a certain point where you're like, you know what I don't want to do? Spend 8 hours just picking up pallets. So I do have the Universal Auto Loader just to speed that process up a bit. But yeah, otherwise it's mostly vanilla. All right. Let me drop off more grain. You want to join with people? You want to play and join people, but you need the lifted Duramax mod? I have no idea what that is. Generally speaking, I run, in all the games I play, I usually run extremely light on my mods. Usually just a handful of quality life, that kind of thing. Or sometimes if it's like a challenge mod, I might grab it as well. So like the Cryogenic Winter and Project Zomboid would be an example of a mod that does make a lot of changes to the game, but you know, that whole kind of thing. But yeah. And no judgment for anyone who does mod their games heavily, like at all. It's mostly I've honestly just run into so many issues, not with necessarily Farm Sim, where I haven't really particularly modded this game that much. I've run into way too many games that I'll even do what are very light mods and then get soft locked in a game because there's a bug, or it gets performance or crashes or conflicts or whatever nonsense. And you know, for one, if I'm streaming, I can't be busy troubleshooting mods. But then the other one is, especially when I was doing the IT software dev, like as my day job kind of thing, the last thing I wanted to do after work, troubleshooting bugs all day, is I didn't want to go home and troubleshoot bugs. I just want to play my games, so I tend not to mod much. Usually the only games I end up modding on any real level are games that, like, I've done everything I can in the game in its current form, and I'm kind of like, you still want more, but you've run out of more to do. Then I'll mod a bit more. Like, Terraria is a game I ended up modding pretty significantly after a while. As well as Stardew Valley, I grabbed a couple big mods. And even by people who mod a lot, they would be like, oh, you ran almost nothing, and they'd be right. But, yeah, like, you know, for Stardew Valley, I grabbed the Stardew Valley Expanded and the Ridgeside Village mod. We played that. Terraria, I did Calamity and the Thorium mods. Yep, Allison literally bringing it up. Yeah, I've done both the Calamity and Thorium mods. I did Calamity. I think Death Mode was the hardest difficulty when I did it. I believe they've got a harder difficulty now. And beat the whole thing. Like, don't get me wrong, the last boss at Death Mode was infuriating, but it was the fun kind of infuriating, where you actually, like, wanna see it through kind of thing, versus, like, infuriating where you're like, I'm not having fun anymore. Why am I continuing to play this game? Alright, it's just too dark for me to do this. But yeah, no, Calamity is an excellent mod for Terraria. And for the record, Ridgeside Village and Stardew Expanded are great mods for Stardew Valley. But there hasn't been many games that have reached that point. Because, like, Project Zomboid, they have really big sweeping mods where you can, you know, cure the zombie apocalypse or bring back up the power grid and all those kind of things. To me, that was a different, like, my whole issue with those, to me, Project Zomboid, the doom and gloom of the game, is, like, the main theme of the game. Alright, Pure, you have a good one. Thank you for hanging out. Like, to me, the doom and gloom of Project Zomboid is thematically the thing that separates it from so many other games in the genre. Because you look at all the other, like, not all the other games, you get, like, a whole bunch of zombie games that are about, like, rebuilding society, you know, or you cure the zombie apocalypse, or you find some way to, like, make it so the area you're in is permanently safe, or whatever the thing is. Or, you know, you escape the zombie apocalypse to, like, the Paradise Island, or whatever that has been spared the zombie apocalypse, or any of that kind of nonsense. Versus Project Zomboid, it's like, literally the game is like, you know, it's the end of days, there's no hope of survival, this is how you died. So by the very premise on the intro, you are being referred into the past tense, that you died. Like, that's already occurred. That happened before the intro of the game started, is your character died. All you're doing is retelling that story. Alright, I'm taking over for the AI because it's going to be weird about this. And so we're a whole bunch of people want, like, you know, be able to, like, win the game. It's like, it's not that game. That's not how you work that. You like that too? Yeah, and so it's like, darn wrong. But the people's like, well, I want a happy ending. It's like, that's fine. Like, there's a litany of games you can play that have that. That's not this one. It's like wanting to be able to have world peace on RimWorld. It's like, look, I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but by all means, you can get mods to do that. But as like a core mechanic of the game, it's like that's just not the game you're playing right now. You were a was, not an is now. Yep. You can have world peace in vanilla. You just have to kill one. Not true, because the game does fudge things and make people exist that don't necessarily exist. You can go and wipe out the other locations, kind of thing. You can go and assault them and clear them out, and it will mess with the raid algorithm and all that. But even if you fully 100% completely eliminate all of the other tribes' presence on the map, you still get attacked. Unless you, like, really, really go through and change your settings a lot, you'll still be attacked. Like, you'll still have the mech clusters, you'll still have the bugs, you'll still have all that. We'll ignore the animals as a thing, but, like, you know, the mech cluster and all that, those are factions. Yeah, or you befriend them, like, everyone, and you get nothing but mechs, sorry. Were, yep. But yeah, that's the whole thing, is, like, it's just thematically, it's just not what the game is, which is fine. Like, again, I'm not being like, how dare you? But that's, to me, that's where mods come in, is that you have the mods to change the theming of your game, to make it something it was never intended to be. But then, you know, the main game, like, they have some kind of vision or whatever they want for it. Alright. So we're not going to drive around and do a whole bunch of stuff in the dark. As I mentioned, this incoming in-game day, we are most likely going to need to slow down time. I've got a lot of projects I need to do. We need to pick up the rest of the straw. We need to plow the fields. We need to do our first pass of fertilizer on the fields. We need to harvest the sorghum. All of these have to happen in one day. Because I have to plant the wheat tomorrow in-game, which takes a decent amount of time. So you anywhere near full? No. The good news is you're nowhere near full. So, gonna go here, go to sleep. And we're gonna slow down time. I'm gonna take it down to 3 times. And if I have to slow it down more, we'll slow it down more. I also haven't been checking to see if there's any good sales. Nothing I care about. Okay, so I believe if I hit 7... Yep, so we're down to 3. Alright, so first on the list is, let's grab this tractor, go to the field we already have equipped and all that, and I'm going to just tell it to start plowing. It's going to do a terrible job because the AI is really bad at plowing, because any obstruction will avoid for like a mile. I am actually looking forward to a lot the field way over there, the sorghum field. I suspect the AI will be actually able to handle that on its own. Oh, you know what I should do? Before we get into this too far? I've been meaning to do this for a while. We deal with that later. But that was getting caught on that tree forever. And year after year after year after year, it was a problem. Because the tractor would try and turn and get caught on it with the AI. So, we are getting rid of it. Okay, so you're good to handle that. Next up, let's grab you. I need to repair and gas up the harvester before I put it on the field. Let's get the harvester all set up and going. And once I have the harvester all set up and going, then I need to take my little tractor and continue picking up the straw. Now, the other issue I'm going to run into is I'm going to run into the issue that I am going to need to empty the harvester into our trailer and do multiple laps of that. And I don't have a spare tractor to commit to that. So I'm going to have to like ping pong back and forth between the vehicles. That's fine. It is a known quantity I've got to deal with. But the sorghum needs to come up today, the fields need to be plowed, and they need to be fertilized today. And the issue is I can plow with the straw down, I just waste it, which, honestly, if that happens, I'm not super upset about it. You know, each of those fields is like $2,000-3,000 worth of straw, which is decent. I shouldn't be upset about it. I'm not. But, all things considered, I got a lot of stuff we got to get done in game today. And then the good news is tomorrow all I have to do is do it past... Oh no, it's gonna rain today? No! No! How long is it gonna rain for? Raining penalizes your harvesting yield. And not a little bit either. I mean, so if it were to rain for a good chunk of the day where I just have to stop harvesting, the good news is I don't believe the sorghum will wither, which is the big, like, when it withers is when you've just thrown away your crop, that you just lost a bunch of money. It will mess with the timing. So let's look at our weather. So it is supposed to start raining. Oh, okay. It literally just rains for 1 hour in the middle of the day. That's fine. That'll work out okay, because we just put this out there. When it starts raining, we stop, and then we wait, and then we start again. So that should actually not cause us too much of an issue. Hey, Night Dweller, how's it going? Then Rual main arc is suddenly out of the crops. This whole playthrough is actually just a, it's a retelling of Noah's Ark. It's just a very convoluted and really long one. Then it starts raining. I start have to cut down trees to build a giant ark. Oh man. Tomb was watching a bunch of like really, you know, way back there Christmas specials, like during the holiday season. You know, ones that were around that you hadn't seen. And, like, there was some of them that were actually alright. There was some of them that was like, okay, this is clearly made for kids, like, not having the best fun. But there was, like, a couple of them, like, oh, man, the religious overtones are coming on thick and hard. Like, whether or not you're a religious person, that's, like, I have no beef on that. But it was like, you know, oh, no, Christmas will be ruined. The children won't get their toys. No teddy bears. No Noah's Ark? And you're like, what kid is getting Noah's Ark? What, like, are children just getting, like, Noah's Ark playsets? What is this? It's like, again, no judgment, but I don't feel like that's the thing that the children are upset about not getting. Like, maybe, like, some Playmobil Noah's Ark or something like that. But it was just kind of scratching your heads like, aha. Okay, double checking. This is ready to harvest as I'm about to do this. I mean, I can just get out and... Yes. And again, it was like no judgment at all about, again, whatever. It was just like the whole thing of like, why of all the toys you could list that the children are missing? And I understand they're going like through with like traditional toys and all that. But like, it was Noah's Ark. It's like, what? You really wanted a wooden ark as a kid? Yeah, and this is the days he had like Nintendo and all that. There was no like, they won't get the like nutcrackers, nothing like that, or like, you know, they won't get their Lego or they won't get their building blocks or whatever. It was a doll and then Noah's Ark were the toys that they brought up. It's like, but what? I don't understand. Yeah, like the cool wooden toys, like the cool wooden animals or the rocking horses and all that. Like those kind of things. It's like, yeah, 100% I get it. It was the fact that it was very specifically like, you won't, and the kids won't get Noah's Ark. And I'm like, man, way to really narrow down the kids that are be receiving these toys. Kind of harsh, man. Melmer says, the way that some theme parks in the US just casually have Noah's Ark themed rides, it always kind of seemed a little over the top from the European perspective. Oh man, we had, what was the name of that place? There was like, I'm gonna call it a theme park. It was a ways away from here. It was in Orlando, like right off the expressway. Oh, it was the Holy Land Experience. Man, what a tourist trap that was. Like, it was impressive looking from the outside. They had like a coliseum and everything. But I was like, man. That sounds interesting. It's gone now. The parents owned it. And when they were like, yeah, we want to retire, and they handed over the kids were like, nope, and shut it down. Oh yeah, no, very genuinely, me and Toom had planned to go see it. Just there's something interesting about going to a tourist trap when you know it is a tourist trap, just to see it for what it is. Like, it could be very interesting. Oh yeah, and also the Holy Land Experience had like the giant ark as well. Like, it's all gone now. They got rid of the whole thing. So they wonder why it reset the counter. The stream streak thing is just kind of buggy, unfortunately. But thank you so much for the 5 stream streak, as well as you're at the getting your extra 450 points. So thank you for that. But yeah, no, it's buggy. They'll get it there eventually. Are you backing up the entire length of that? Come on, man. Cedric Cook says, Key West is a tourist trap, one street filled with gift shops and such. Yes, but also no. I will give Key West from having gone there myself, that unless it's changed, you've got like lots of street performers, they have lots of events going on. So there's at least some stuff going on there. Is it a typical tourist place that's got a bajillion gift shops and everything? Uh-huh. But that's almost any touristy area, even if it's not a tourist trap. But, interesting. We had an ark visit your town, and the harbor master said it wasn't safe, and was stuck with us for ages. Oh yeah, we had, they were recreations of the ships that, like the Mayflower and all that. But they're recreations of all those ships that were brought over. And they were like, they're really snazzy, but they ended up getting stuck in port for a while, because, you know, the person came and was like, this isn't waterworthy anymore. It's like, it wasn't waterworthy, like, bad design. It's like, this ship needs some pretty serious repairs. It's like, you've got people living on this tiny little boat, like, you can't have it like this. We had a lot of problems with that in Central Florida. We had the gambling boats used to always come in on, way over on the coast. And they had the good old Sun Cruise Casino. The number of times that boat got shut down for egregious safety violations, oh man. it was sketch going on that boat, and me and my friends used to do that every once in a while. I'd bring like $20 or whatever we were gonna donate to the house that night. You get on the elevator. If the boat was rocking this way, the elevator door just very slowly close. And then if you're on the other side, the door would slam close at full speed. It was fun, but yeah, it was real sketch. Man, I'm actually surprised it still has like all this stuff left from here. Oh, how is our sheep doing? They're fed, right? Okay, so they need water and they need grass. They're not out of either. But they do need they do need a stock up. So that'll be yet another thing I need to get done today. The good news is not going to be a problem today. It'll be something we need to take care of. That's why I keep getting toy boats. Little Sith Lord. Gotcha. Remember reading damage reports for old ships? And one of the galleons, like, there's a hole large enough for a sloop to go through. We are generally surprised it didn't sink already. Oh, yeah. There's lots of stuff that you run into, like, really? But yeah, no, it was always interesting going to the port. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some of those ships were, like, really well maintained. Like, a lot of the cruise ships, they were really well maintained and all that. Then if they had a problem, is like one of those, like, more minor problems where it's like, oh, you know, there's this code and technically you're not in adherence, or, you know, they're not in adherence, but, like, just barely, you know, they're supposed to have, like, you're supposed to have this much shielding in this spot, and they're technically a millimeter short. Does it really matter? No, but they are technically in code violation, so they gotta fix it. You know, it's like, it was always the minor stuff with the cruise ships. But then it was like the Sun Cruise is like, we checked 32 of their fire extinguishers. 30 of them did not function and were past inspection date. Is like really, really, really awful. Yeah, it's usually the fire marshal who shut down Sun Cruise. And then they had, like, the last time, they got, like, the book thrown at them that they actually got proper code enforcement in there and ran through it all. And Sun Crew's like, we don't want to do this anymore. Ships and grandfather did thing. Imagine reading a report, damaged aircraft carrier, so you can sail a destroyer through it. How's it afloat? That was, I used to work local government, and I got to work with, like, code enforcement and the fire department, the police department. Not the medical side, that was a total separate entity. I did the IT side of their stuff. And you'd get all sorts of wonderful stories. I'm saying wonderful here in the utter highest, most sarcasm and air quotes and everything of, like, you know, you have, like, the minor code enforcement things, like, you know, when they did a major update in how your trusses and helms had to be, so when you're doing a major renovation of your home, you had to bring yourself up to code. You know, if you weren't doing a major renovation, it's fine. But, like, you had to change the trusses in your home. And when I say you change the trusses, the wood part was the same. It was, I'm gonna get the terms wrong. Cookie could probably correct me on the terms. But where you have, you know, your trusses come to a joint, that they put, like, a metal bracket kind of thing over it to lock it all together. That way, you know, if something happens, your whole roof doesn't cave in on you. And they changed the rules around what that had to be stronger for hurricanes, because I'm in an area that gets slapped by hurricanes regularly. And so they're like, okay, all houses from now on have to be built with this better bracket. Gusset plate or something? Yeah, I don't know the term, but it was a big thing. It's like stuff like that you totally understand. At first, like, okay, I want to tear out my entire kitchen and rebuild my entire kitchen. They're like, okay, well, code's coming through. Well, you're not up to code on this. And now it's not, like, it's a big deal, but not a big deal. It's, like, not super expensive, but you still have to bring someone in there to do it. They don't have to, like, rip your whole roof off or anything. They go in, they mount stuff up, they tear off the old thing, put the new one on like, over it, and they just have to go through all your trusses. My understanding, secondhand. So it's an inconvenience, but it's not that big a deal in the sense of the effort and cost involved. It's a big inconvenience to have people do that. You know, when you're already planning and dropping probably like $20,000 and gutting your kitchen and redoing it. But then you'd hear like these like truly egregious violations of like, you know, a second floor like patio, like porch thing coming off of it. They said was detached from building, and you're like, it's like, oh god. It's like there's this house just sitting here, and they just have this patio sitting 10 feet up. That's like concrete, and it's come completely detached from the building. It's just kind of sitting on these like little wooden stilts that are mostly there just to like support a little bit of weight. It's not really intended on keeping it, you know, in the proper orientation or anything. And you're just like, what? And then, you know, of course, that person would throw a hissy fit about failing code. I mean, at that point, it's more significant a repair because you'd have to tear the whole thing down and rebuild it. I don't think you just yank it back into position at that point. You've let the damage go far enough that it, you know, has become detached from building. Oh, right, I needed this over here as well. But you have all sorts of these reports that are like truly awful, egregious violations and all that, and you're like, oh my god. Those are the ones code enforcement go, it's like, yeah, your location is no longer fit for occupation until this is resolved. Like, we can let some stuff slide. This isn't one of those. Versus like the trusses thing, it's like, oh yeah, you know, you're technically not up to code in this. Don't do this other thing, like, you know, I can't remember exactly how it works. They'd sit there and be like, yeah, you're not up to code, you have this amount of time to take care of it, and then there's no problem. You know, and it was usually like pretty generous too, like a couple of months or something like that. It's like, yeah, you've got this violation that you need to deal with. You've got like 2 months to sort it out, and then if you don't sort it out after 2 months, then we're gonna have to start yelling at you and whatnot. But stuff like that, you're like, yeah, people aren't allowed to be in this building. Like, this is straight up gonna kill someone. You can't have anyone in here till this is fixed. And to them, they're like, fixed. You can either fix it so it's reattached, or you can fix it by taking it down. Either's acceptable. We don't care. But, you know, and also like, you forget to tell someone, they go to step out in the back patio, and there's, you know, a foot or two gap between you and the back patio that has an 11, 12-foot drop, because you got 10 foot for the floor, plus the actual thickness of the floor, and all that. I needed to have this over here, actually. And you're just like, how do you get into that state and not be like, wait a second, maybe I should fix this death trap attached to my home? And I understand if you just don't have the money, but they're only going to drop by there when you're doing a major retrofit, or there's like, you start having people complain because, you know, your thing's going to come off your house. Or they think, oh, just use common sense. It is unbelievable sometimes. Now, there are times when it's something that's, like, really weird, like, you know, like when you have, like, the elderly couple, and they have a house, they have a basement, and they never go down there because they've gone up there in years to the point that stairs are difficult. Not that they can't, but they're not going to go down there on a regular basis because there's a whole issue there. And then you turn around and they go, okay, well, you know, we want to get this accessibility safety thing in our home, but it is actually the kind of thing that's a big enough of a change in your home that you need to get your permits and whatnot. Because especially with accessibility and all that kind of thing, is, you know, you want to make sure the work's done right. You don't want people cutting corners on stuff like, you know, a ramp or an elevator or whatever, or like those things that attach the elevator that like slide you up or whatever. You don't want your people popping in there cutting corners and not mounting things correct. So that way, you know, you get halfway up the stairs and then it collapses off the side of your wall or something. And then they go in and, you know, code enforcement comes in, they look in the basement, they go, like your foundation is like done. You flooded down here and it has compromised everything. And they're none the wiser because they don't go down there. Or, you know, like there's been a breach in the wall and there's water getting into the home and they have to like fix the wall. Hey, Diligent Goo, how's it going? And that happens. Like, that's actually reasons why you won't find very many basements here in Florida, is you have to be very careful about where you have a basement, and they have to be built very sturdy, because the water table is not very far down. There's also places that you go just a little ways down, and you're just straight up in limestone. Slowly but surely waking up as it's 7:30 in the morning. Well, it's good that you're slowly but surely waking up. Yeah, listen, the good news is when those people get caught, they usually get in not a little trouble, they get in the big trouble. They usually don't last very long. They usually get away with it a couple of times, and then someone gets upset. Like, you know, they're paying someone off to like ignore some problem, and then, you know, either that person gets upset with you and then tells on you, which of course when that happens you both get in trouble, so it's really dumb to do that. Or you go on the other end where an employee who's pissed off about it hears about it, or whatever, or a competitor hears about it, and then an investigation happens, and then you go to jail. So while it does happen, it's usually not a consistent thing. Usually I have like the rotten person, they get in there, maybe they last a year or 2 or 3, or maybe if they do really well, maybe they last a good long while if it's like a small enough city that there's just not enough eyeballs. And there's that kind of thing. Well, that's a tragedy. The one that kind of folks lost a kid to the fire. Yeah. We had something not too dissimilar. Because of AT&T. Very specifically AT&T. Individually and on the point AT&T. That we had our different fire stations around the city, and we had one of our fire stations, I think it was our northmost fire station, that had its main line and its redundant phone line. And just because of the nature of how the laws work with when you go to hire people, you're supposed to take 3 bids and go with the lowest, which is dumb in so many ways. Like, I get it, they don't want you overspending government and all that, but it does mean you get a lot of like real crap work done. But, so what ended up happening is we had one company who dealt with the actual phones inside the building. We had another company who dealt with the connection between the phones in the building and, like, the actual hookup to, like, the D-Mark and everything, which is just where your phone lines come into the building. And then we had a third company, who was AT&T, who dealt with the line coming to the building, to the D-Mark, and the D-Mark itself. And that was a different company than any of the other locations had. And then because of this, we were having issues with not one, but 2 of the phone lines, both of the phone lines, going down sometimes when it rained. And, you know, for those who are aware of Florida, that's basically 2/3 of the year. We have torrential downpours almost every afternoon. And I, being in the coordinator position, was basically getting on the phone being like, hey, you're out here. Like, our fire department is down. Like, we have an entire fire station who is not getting the call to go out and save people. Like, you need to be out here. And, you know, AT&T is like, no, it's the people over there. And they'd be like, no, it's the people out there. no one ever blamed the people who did the phones, because, like, physical phones, because you could test that. And they went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we did have a fire that the call didn't get through, and so the next closest fire station had to respond, which is, you know, halfway across town, and they were too late. Now, a person had died in that fire. Would that person have died if they got there? The honest answer is probably yes. Getting the call in the right position, it was probably still too late by the nature of what happened. But it was one of those things that the city attorney got involved and was like, here's the deal. You will have, like, it was like all three of you, you will have a representative on site at this fire department on this day, and you will solve it, or we were going to start holding someone criminally liable for negligence. And they all showed up, and within 15 minutes, AT&T's like, oh, it's the DMARC itself. That's us. And they fixed it, and it's all fine. But it took literally having to basically have a lawyer go, we are going to, like, literally rake you over the coals and likely win a case against you for a very bad PR nightmare before they actually did their job. Because everyone was just like, oh, nope, it's them. No, it's them. It's not us. So, not a big fan. And I get why we have rules around, like, you have to get, like, you have to get at least 3 bids for a job, take the lowest, unless it is, I forget the term for it. There is a term for when a job, like, when a thing, either for very specific, like, security kind of reasons, must come from one vendor, or that there is some agreement that you do need to specifically get, you know, there's a term for when it's like, you are the sole source, we are going to go for this particular thing, and there's, you know, there's hurdles they have to go through to get that locked in, that there's a very specific reason you're doing that. But you're not going to get that in, like, everyday infrastructure stuff like the telephone line or whatever. And it's almost always in the event that switching individual companies to do the thing would be extremely detrimental to the quality of service and all that. Or there's some other, like, major benefit to the public for that kind of thing. And it's not super rare, but it's usually very specialized things that happens. Lev says, I have a feeling that, not the not AT&T guy should have been able to prove it wasn't them. Well, that was the thing. You know, within that case, both of them were pointing fingers at each other. And the issue was, the people from the inside were basically like, hey, once it's inside the building, we're fine. And AT&T is like, well, once we get it to the building, it's fine. Like, you know, all the way to the building, it's fine. And it was the actual point where it goes from the outside to the inside of the building. That actual location, the DMARC, was the problem. So both of them were basically pointing to the other side of the wall, but it was the wall. It's not literally the wall, it's the DMARC. So it was kind of one of those things that they both had, like, the evidence to back up that it was on, you know, it was on the other side, without considering the fact that the DMARC itself, which was AT&T's, was the actual problem. And I've run into that kind of crap with, and it's not even them, it's been other ISPs too. Like, I used to have, I don't remember what they called themselves at the time, Spectrum, Time Warner, Bright House. They change their name every 2 or 3 years. But I had them set up here, and I had technician after technician after technician after technician coming out because my internet was dropping and all that. And it was just this huge fiasco. And they would come in and they replaced the modem like 3 times. They replaced the wire run to the house like 2-3 times. They, you know, supposedly did a bunch of work in other places, and it kept being a problem and kept being a problem. And I finally started doing what they're calling ping graph, which is basically where you just keep a large graph to show, like, the internet up and down times. And it was down so much that we have, I can't remember the law. There's a law here in Florida that basically you can say, hey, you have failed to provide me the agreed upon service, as a percentage kind of thing. Like, even though you have given me an internet connection, it's down so much, I can basically qualify it as it's not provided. And you need to be able to compensate me accordingly. And it basically said, here's the deal. You need to fix this. I have all this stuff that I can basically go to you from all of the time that this has been a problem. And using my ping graph, because I was ping graphing from me to the switch, or sorry, the modem, from there all the way out to the first jump, the first node they had, which I don't know where it's located, but it'd be probably for the neighborhood. And then from like there out to like just a random internet website. It's like, I can confirm that it's your piece of hardware in this middle that is the piece of problem. I don't know where this thing is located. I don't know what it does. I don't know what it is. But I can confirm without a doubt that your failure is at this area or the cable leading to it. And I can tell from where it goes out from here. That means at least my street, if not my entire neighborhood of 100-something houses that you exclusively have access to right now, are also in there. It's like, I am more than happy to make all this information available to all of my neighbors so that we can all basically get refunded for the last year or so of internet due to failure to provide. Because if I'm down and this trunk is running everyone here, it means we're all down. And they sent an engineer out like the next day and he had it fixed in like 15 minutes. There's basically, they put these plastic boxes in front of your house that have a circuit board that puts stuff all over the place. And it was the circuit board inside that plastic box, you know, gets ruined by the weather because it's so humid and everything. And the thing that was even more frustrating is like, oh yeah, these break all the time. Like, it's a known issue. They really need to train the technicians on them and have the technicians be able to come out and deal with this. And I was just like, you know, I was happy to have the internet, but I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like, this isn't even just like a known issue, it's like a common problem here. And I have been dealing with this for months. And it's a stupid circuit board that costs them almost nothing. I did tell everyone else about it, but like that point it was fixed, and I don't think anyone took action on it. But it was just one of those things. Yeah. I have very negative opinions on ISPs from dealing with them for both the commercial and the residential aspect. And like, don't get me wrong, I don't envy the position they have to be in so far as maintaining and expanding and doing all the infrastructure and all the costs and labor and training and yada yada yada. But also, I'm paying through the nose, so I don't really feel bad for them. Like, I'm paying them enough that that's fine that they have to like deal with that. You know, if I was paying like $10, $15 a month, I'd be like, oh yeah, no, I get why this is spotty. Man, that's a whole mess. And that is, if you're ever fighting with your ISP, that is one way to help yourself out. Is you can do what's known as a trace route. You don't need to really understand all the ins and outs of it, but you can do a trace route. And that'll generally show like the past stuff is taking through the network. And the only like meaningful kind of things you deal with on that is with a trace route, you'll have like your computer, maybe a switcher router inside your home, your modem, you know, then you'll have like the first jump outside. And that'll usually be like some server node or switch, some switch or whatever that usually is belonging to your local ISP. Then you'll go out there, and who knows where it goes from there. Like, from there it could go anywhere. But usually what you want to do to set up to try and establish what's going on is you could do the trace route, you can get all that information, and you can set up a ping graph from your computer to your switch, and then, like, basically each jump within your network that you have control of to see if it's on you, because a lot of times it can be. Especially with, like, the cheap budget modems that they give you. Or if you go and, you know, buy, like, a budget D-Link switch or whatever, which is totally fine. But, you know, some of those things are less durable against not particularly great electricity. That it can be that you got a switch that's having problems because you've been using it for 10 years and it's gotten zapped a couple of times or whatever. But then you can look outside to see, like, okay, does the problem live between my computer and my switch? If so, it's the cable. It's either like the back of your computer, the cable, or the switch itself. You know, if it's the next jump, it's between the switch, that cable, or the router. If it's the next one out there, it's the router, the cable, or like whatever their device is out there. You can narrow it down most of the time to see if it is your ISP. So when they start giving you, well, we don't see any problems. They're like, well, I have this thing called a ping graph right here, and I can point at you where in this mix the problem lives. So it is your problem. So stop BSing me. You may not know what the problem is, and that's totally fair. But I can point the finger at you and say, I can tell you for a fact, this is in your part of the network. Which that's all troubleshooting stuff you learn doing IT stuff. Are you done? I think you're done. In the relative. We will... Yeah, so I'm not gonna worry about this yet. What I'm gonna do is we're just gonna send the, We're gonna send this tractor to each and every one of the fields and just have it do its first pass. Like with the AI. And then I will do cleanup. Just to make good time. We're actually making pretty good time so far. Alright. But it doesn't help that some of the folks aren't trained properly. Oh, yeah. Got into an argument with an agent that's convinced the upload download same thing. Oh, yeah, no, I've had that argument. We have the people who pop by here, usually from Spectrum, who are like, hey, you know, they're literally a salesman that's going door to door. And sometimes I'm nice, and it's like, hey, you know, like, you know, who are you? What's going on? That kind of thing. And there are other times where it's like the moment I realize their Spectrum, it's like, yeah, this is, you know, this neighborhood has no solicited posted at the gate coming in here. So you need to leave or I'm going to call the police. Like, you're not allowed to be doing this here. They'll be like, oh, well, I was just servicing your neighbor. It's like, no, you weren't. It's like, I'm gonna stand at my door now, and I'm gonna watch you drive away. And if I see you stick around, we are gonna call the police, because you're not supposed to be door to door. Plus, with those ones, you never know when it's just someone scamming, pretending to be it. You get a whole bunch of their personal sensitive information, then you can run off and do all sorts of crap with it. But yeah. And like the number of times I've had them come out where they're like, well, you can get up to 500 megabit download. I'm like, cool. Well, I need to have upload. It's like, well, it's 500 megabit. It's like, oh, so like that's the download. What is the upload? Like, well, it's the internet connection speed's 500 megabits. Like, okay, I get it. You don't understand. But it's like, well, those things. And I get it. They're not all trained. That's fair. I don't expect everyone to know the difference between download and upload. But if you're selling a product that one of the main criteria that people are going to care about is the upload speed, you should know what that is. Because I can only assume you're not telling me because it's crap. Because usually with Spectrum, it is crap. Alright, sorry about that. So the problem is your equipment, not ours. Alright then. Why does nobody in the flat flat has internet then? Oh yeah, no, that's well, that's the reason you ping graph, because usually, you know, you sit there, and when you go and they sit there and they go, oh, well, it's got to be on your end, and you go, oh, okay, here, let me show you this thing, and you usually have to explain what the heck they're looking at. It's like, yeah, I can show you that at exactly 5 p.m. on this day, your equipment out there dropped, and then it did it again at 7 p.m. and it did it again at 9 p.m. And I can demonstrate that between here and here it was fine, and between here and here it was fine. And so I can go as far as to tell you that at this point, where I start my connection to your equipment, that's where it died. So, it isn't my equipment. I also have the problem that I have a very custom configuration on my house. That I actually have a really fancy switch in my closet that I have everything hooked up. To bypass the piece of junk AT&T, you know, modem and all that stuff. Like, I have the modem, but it, like, what I do... So, they have the modem, and then they have this router, and you're required to use the router. And the router's crap. Like, the router's straight up garbage. it forces you to use their own DNS. Like, it goes through everything, and it tracks a bunch of your stuff, and it's really, really invasive and off in a whole lot of ways. And it really, really hurts your performance on your internet connection as well. So I wanted to get that piece out of the middle, and I was required to do it because it runs authentication through that router. And if I don't do the authentication, I don't get internet. So I took the time that I set up this switch and everything, and this gateway and all that, that I have full control of the software and everything. And I've got scripts running on it, where what I've got is I've got one port that has the router off on its own little sequestered little corner by itself that nothing else goes through. And what it does a connection, it jumps over, hits the authentication against the router, finishes that, and then moves the entire rest of the network going through, like, just bypassing the router entirely. It was a huge pain to set up, and I had to back it all up like 3 times. Oh yeah, no, that router gets thrown in the corner. It knows what it did. It needs to mind its own business is what it needs to do. But, so it's one of those things like, oh, we want to send a technician. It's like, no, I'd rather you don't send a technician. I can assure you my equipment inside my home is working. Yeah, I really don't need you to send a technician. What I need you to do is I can point that your issue is over here to go service that thing. Because I can show you all the graphs and everything to point where the problem is. I really don't want you to come into my home. Because the first time, any time I've had to have a technician, the first thing they do is like, well, it's all this stuff's that your problem is, like, and then you have to sit down with the ping graphs like, no, I can establish without a doubt the problem is on your end. I'm just gonna trample this little bit of crops. It's fine. Unfortunately, I have to use her modem as a fiber cat bridge. You had to buy your own router and make recommendations to IP tech folk. Yeah, so that's the same thing I had to do at first, Adams, was I had to use, because like they have like their modem piece. Actually, was it a modem router? I'm trying to remember. No, I think their modem was a separate component from their router. And so I did have to use that piece of hardware, but it's for the authentication component. Once I got past that, my gateway could... Wait, don't I... I'm trying to remember the setup. I haven't had to touch it in like 2-3 years. That's how stable it is. I never have to touch it. Like, that's how much of a difference it makes when you set things up properly. I have had that thing set up for years and years now. It's probably like been 5-6 years that I first set that up. Whenever I got fiber first hooked up. And not first hooked up. It's whenever I got fiber hooked up and I realized how annoying their modem was. It's not that it would go down on any frequency, but I got that thing set up and I haven't had to touch any of it so much as even a restart, but like one time over all that time span. And that's because they made, I can't remember, they made some change to their authentication that it broke my scripts and I had to just, you know, circle back and deal with it. I think it's like they changed where the authentication got pointed, not like the hardware wise, but like where it would call out to. And when they changed that, my script broke because it was, you know, trying to talk to the wrong place. But yeah, so that was the whole thing. I did have one technician who came in and got real excited when he saw my setup. He's like, "This is awesome." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, our routers are a piece of crap." Because they're all contractors. They don't care. They're like, "I'm just doing my job. I'm getting paid." But he came in and was like, "Oh yeah, can we check out your modem?" And you know, I have that hesitation. It's like, "Yeah, sure. You're not gonna get anything done and just." You know, you sit there and you show, like, because I have a whole wiring closet and everything I set up. Where, you know, I've got the punch boards and everything where it goes from the switch and they go into different ports that go out to, like, I wired pretty much the whole house. I still meant to wire one more room and it never happened because time, but it was pretty funny. But that guy just never seen anything like. As a younger guy, he's probably like 20, 21, somewhere in that area. And just had never seen anyone like that elaborate of a network setup. I did appreciate after I did that. I was like, so do you believe me that it's on your end? And he's like, yeah, I'm pretty convinced. That was I think is the lawn service weed whackered the fiber line on accident. Because they just put a sheet, like a tube over it, and after they had like hit it enough times with the weed whacker, it got through the tube and took out the line, which wasn't that big a deal. They just reran it because at that last length, it's not fiber anymore. It's fiber like up to your house, and then it switches to, I think it's Cat 6. Which is fine. Like, you don't... It's a gig up and down. Cat 6 can handle that. It's fine. You're not going to see any meaningful change in your performance if it's fiber that last 2 inches. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the stream. Alright, so that's looking very full. No, it's not full, but it's full enough I won't be able to do that more. Okay, it's time for the first load of sorghum to put in the granary. And you're still plowing over there. We're still picking up the straw. So it says, you used to work as an engineer dispatch. Had a new engineer bring down an entire site when replacing a piece of equipment. Poor guy almost quit on the spot. One of the experienced engineers went there and found a physical loop in the network. Oh, like they had a switch plugged into itself kind of thing, or like something of that, or like to like the switchboard or punch board or whatever. So the computer or the switch would be like, let me talk. Why? Like, I am so confused. Because it would like respond to itself back and forth kind of thing. I think the most frustrated I ever got with network troubleshooting was I was working as assistant network administrator. And one of the VPs in their company bought some, like, you know, cheap wireless router, like a regular, like, Linksys or whatever, Netgear, I don't remember the brand, like, you know, perfectly fine router for home use or whatever, but, like, just this cheapy little router. And so you've got this network with these thousands of dollar switches and all this kind of garbage. And the issue was it had the DHCP server turned on the little switch. And so, for those who don't know what that is, you have these things called IP addresses to your computer. It's basically your computer's phone number. And what happens is, the normal way it goes is you plug your computer in the network, and your computer goes, hi, network, what's my phone number? And the network says, okay, here you go, here's your phone number. And that's what, you know, behind the scenes lets all the other computers talk to you. Now, the problem is, when you have 2 of those on a network, is you have 2 of those who have their entire different records and everything. You don't get to talk to each of them. Your computer, it hops on, and whichever one answers it first, it gets that number, and it cannot talk to anyone outside of that setup. You know, I'm overstating it because there's a little bit more complexity to it. But, you know, that's the idea. You've effectively split your network into 2 networks. So we figure out that there's this DHCP server somewhere on our network. And we don't have a clue where it is, like the physical hardware. And so we're running around just trying to figure out how the heck do you know figure that out. Hey man, got any tips for how to grow streams faster? So, like, obviously everyone's going to have their own opinions and suggestions and whatnot. The biggest things I could say is consistency. More than anything you could possibly have is consistency. Make sure whatever your setup is, like the type of content you're streaming should be consistent. If possible, your schedule should be consistent. That's one of the ones that's very difficult for a lot of people to do, especially for working like in the service industry where who knows what hours you're going to be working and all that kind of stuff. And another thing is to, at the end of the day, remember it's about the viewers. Like, you're making content for them. Now, by all means, you want to make sure you're enjoying it and all that, because it will absolutely bleed through if you're not enjoying it. But it is absolutely one of those things that you we'll have to kind of go through and figure that out. But it's good to sit back when you're starting and go, what is the value I am offering my viewers? What is the reason someone would come to my channel? Not like why they're coming now, but like, what do you hope to offer them? And then try and be consistent. It's also a good idea, any changes you make to your channel, good, bad, or otherwise, to stop periodically and just go, okay, what are core things for my channel? Like, very important core things for my channel. What is the value I offer my channel? Those are like your main things that you should never jeopardize. And then any other change you go, does this add to or distract from that value? Because there's lots of things you'll see other creators do that work amazingly well for them and are great ideas that are absolutely not a good fit for your channel because you're offering a different value. For example, we usually do like chill vibes, relaxing kind of stuff here. Whereas, you know, there are some channels that are very high energy and engaging and they'll like have all sorts of memes going on and stuff popping on screen. And there's nothing wrong with that content. It's just as good content. But for a relaxing channel, if I had where someone can push a button and a big explosion happens on the screen or something, it's taking away from my value offer. It is a negative to the channel. Something that would otherwise be a positive. And then the last thing is network. Very genuinely network. So raid other people, even if you're only bringing in 2 or 3 people. Sure, you might run into the rare person who's a jerk about it. Don't raid them again. But raid into people. People love seeing new people. Be active in others' community without promoting your own community. Like, go to other streams, talk in their channels, do all that type of stuff. If they ask, then you're totally fine to be like, oh yeah, no, I was streaming early. That's fine. Don't hop into someone else's stream. It's like, oh yeah, just finished stream. You're gonna, like, people are not gonna respond well to that. And all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so it's a whole thing. There is no one answer. Another thing to also keep in mind is what game you're playing. If you're really small, you can get away with playing games that have next to no viewership on the platform because you can pick up the handful of people who are interested in that. So, you know, you could break out Kenshi or whatever and you might be able to pick up some people. You want to be very careful about playing games that are like mainstream kind of games. So what I'm talking about is like, you don't, like, if you're brand new and you're trying to build going to League of Legends, it's going to be very difficult. And the reason for that is there's the games page where you like search for a game and you go there. And the reason it's difficult is because I gotta scroll 10 pages before I find you, which means I'm not going to ever find you through the games page. So it'll be very difficult to get those initial things or for the random raid to pop through, because they're gonna also search the games page if they're looking for someone new. So being mindful of the size of the audience that you would have to appear on that games page is something to consider, especially by the beginning. So it's totally fine to play, and it doesn't mean you have to choose someone that's got like no audience, but ideally you want to be in that top row. Obviously, if you're just starting, that's probably not going to happen. But once you start getting some audience, you're going to try to have that. Is it smart to start off streaming Farm Sim 22? I mean, if you want to do simulations, Farm Sim is not a bad game. Because I would say at the peak time of day, Farm Sim pulls like 2,500-ish viewers. At the quieter time, it's closer to like 600-700-ish. So very genuinely, it wouldn't be a terrible game to stream. Because I would assume what would most likely happen is during the quieter time, you'd probably be, if you could get like 5-6 viewers, probably be like second or third row, so you have a okay chance of someone clicking through. Not a good chance, but an okay chance. But when you're at the beginning, that's about what you got to work with. But yeah, like I said, just be consistent at the best you can. Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with OG Mana that like the game is a consideration that's strategic, but ultimately it's going to be stuff like consistency. Another thing I will say, do not worry about buying some $1,000 microphone, video camera, lighting setup, or green screen, or all these other things. You do not need that. This right now is on a Blue Yeti that is like 7 years old and probably runs like $100. And I actually have a video on YouTube where I have this microphone, and because I used to author courses for software development professionally, where I have like a really high-end condenser mic and everything in the house, I prefer this for streaming because this is just gonna work. That high-end condenser mic that has an interface and has all these other things I've got to deal with, you get this much better audio quality, and it is just gonna absolutely screw you with problems. It's just not the right fit. So don't sweat. Now, if your mic sounds like absolute garbage, you got to deal with that. But you don't need to spend much money to do that. Like, you can get away with a $20 like USB headset mic as long as you take the time to like turn on, like set up a noise gate, set up noise suppression, those kind of things. You'll usually do pretty okay on your audio. Your audio doesn't have to be good. It needs to just be better than terrible. And stuff like whether or not you should be on camera, whether or not you should have a VTube, whether or not you should have any presence whatsoever, that is going to be a lot more in, you know, personal desire, opinion, whatever. It is a thing that, generally speaking, having some representation of you on screen will do better than a lack of. You can still completely succeed without having anything. If you do go like the VTube route, you do not need a multiple $1,000 setup. Just, you know, make sure it works. No problem. I wish I could be like, oh yeah, if you do this, you'll make it. I don't want to mislead you. It is one of those things that part of it is your own effort, part of it is your own stuff, part of it is luck. And all you can do on your part is to line everything else up, so should an opportunity knock on your door, that you are prepared to run with it. So I jokingly say making opportunity, and all that is having everything set up where should someone drop in with a big raid, you're prepared to provide the content that will hopefully convince some of those people to stick around. Yep. Oh yeah, don't be afraid. Especially, that is one of the freeing things of when you're really small. One of the most freeing things is you can just switch it up day to day to try to find something that sticks. And you're not risking much. Yeah, you might alienate your existing audience, but if you don't have an existing audience, it's worth switching it up to see if you have something that sticks, more resonates, and all that. Now, as you grow, that becomes more problematic. Like if you switch your content way too fast and aggressively, you'll run off your audience. But early on, when you have like only 4, 5, 6 viewers, you can do that. Yep, it happens. It is the nature of the beast. Okay. And once the ads are done, I'm not sure if let me make sure I get that name right. Country Plays. Country Plays. I'm not sure if you have. Yeah. Gotcha. I'll wait till the ad break is over. Alright, is that the last of the straw? Because that'll be good. That'll be one less thing you gotta run around and try and manage. Alright, in a couple minutes here, I'll need to use the restroom and all that. And probably should actually eat my dinner here before it gets to be too late. I'm being bad about it. But with the task that I have to manually do out of the way, that'll be perfectly fine for me to grab one of the other vehicles and just sit there and let the AI do its thing for a minute while I take care of the rest. Because I would have this tractor run around and deal with the fertilizer, but as you can see, leaving it up to the AI to plow a field, the results, they save me time, they're not what I would call good. they're the person who you hire, that you bring them in, and you're like, okay, like you technically got the job done to a point it saved me time, but I am gonna go in after that. What is the temperature up here? I am like dying in this room. And it's freezing outside. Not freezing, it's nippy outside. I have a feeling that Tomb adjusted up because she was getting cold. Because it's been rainy and she's been out, so I wouldn't be surprised. No, it's only up 1 degree. Alright, whatever. Alright, country. You have a good one. And best of luck on your content. There was something else I was going to say, and then I completely forgot. Oh! Moderation is important. Like, you need to decide what you are and are not okay with in moderation. You know, put those stakes down in the ground and enforce it. Because if you don't, well, sure, you'll get the toxic people to stick around, which will make your viewer count go up. It'll ensure those who aren't toxic won't stick around. Moderation. It's so when someone pops in your channel and starts just spouting out an endless series of cuss words, you go, hey man, cut it out, or I'm gonna time you out. Or if someone says something racist, you go, and ban. You get the idea. People are gonna make your space not a place other people want to be. And again, wherever the line in the sand, you can be very strict in moderation, you can be a little bit more lax in moderation. Just be aware of where you want those lines in the sand to be. Every creator's gonna have their own rules, but you know, you gotta decide on those, and you gotta be willing to enforce them. It will cost you viewers. It will. But it's better to cost those viewers who are gonna drive away other new viewers by being that way than to keep viewers you don't really want. Yeah, no, it's also easier to be stricter and you can be relaxing on it than to go relax and make it stricter. Oh yeah, yeah. I actually do really like that. One of the things that they've added is, so they have a feature where you can share a ban list, and generally speaking, you really only want to share a ban list with other channels that are very aligned with kind of your view on moderation. You don't want to just share a ban list with, you know, everyone because of your friend or whatever. There's a lot of people who are friends of this channel who are far stricter than I am and are far more lax than I am. Neither of them would be a good idea for me or them to share a ban list. We're just misaligned. And it isn't to say they're wrong or I'm right or whatever. Like, we all have our different lines in the sands of what is and isn't okay. And part of that has to go with your value prospect as well. That if I'm going to be having, you know, chill vibes and all that here, I gotta be way stricter about people who would endanger that. People who would jeopardize that. You know, versus if you're someone who, you're going more for like the cliche, slapsticky kind of silliest, dry humor, meme kind of stuff, you're gonna have to be a little bit more lax on a lot of your moderation stuff, because you're gonna have people memeing real hard. But the point is, if someone's being like super memey and like that's their content, I'm less likely going to want to share a ban list with them, because, well, I mean, actually that'd probably be okay. It'd be they wouldn't want my ban list, because stuff that I would need to enforce in my channel may not be something they would want to enforce there. And to clarify for everyone here how the ban list thing works. Say for example, I share a ban list with Allison, which I don't, but let's say I do. What would happen is if I ban someone from this channel and then Allison is streaming later and that person joins Allison's channel, what it does is it puts a little box around that person when they comment and just says, hey, just so you know, this person you share a ban list with banned this person. And now that they have like the thing, it'll be like, you know, ban this person because racial slurs, or ban this person, like whatever I or one of the moderators types in for the reason. And it could be one of those things that, like, I don't automatically ban someone because someone else I know banned them, but it is one of those things that when I see that prompt, which is almost never, but when I see that prompt pop up, it's usually like hair stands and end, like, alright, you know, I'm hovering over the button. It's like, all right, is this person going to be a problem? I've only had 2 people come through that were on someone else's ban list, and both of them, they popped in, were immediately a problem. So it was definitely one of those ones that they came in for violence. That was their intent right from the beginning. Yeah, no, it basically lets you know to be ready that this person's probably someone you're going to have to stop what you're doing and deal with real fast. Which, to a certain degree, happens the same thing when you see first-time chatter and they say something that's kind of like that. Like, when someone pops in first-time chatter, that's fine. When someone pops in first-time chatter and they say something that's, like, bordering on not okay, you're like, alright. or, hey, streamer, can I ask you a question? First-time chatter. And you're like, okay, this could be totally innocent, but it probably isn't, so I'm just going to go ahead and hover my finger over the button here, just in case, because 95% of the time it is a troll. Once in a while it's totally innocent, being like, hey streamer, you know, can I ask you a question? How does this work in this game? Oh, that's fine, let's talk about it. Yeah, it's basically, hey streamer, can I ask you a question? And like every mod is like ready to fire, because most of the time that happens, it is straight up going to be followed by something racist. And again, a lot of time, like, it can be totally innocent, and that does happen. Where are you going with that plow AI? I understand you need to back up a little, but, like, that's... Wait, you're going to the right? Why are you going to the right? We'll wait and see where this is going. What? You were already lined up. The AI has been fired? Or graphic design. Oh, yeah. Hey, streamer, did you know that I offer commissioned graphic art? No. Banned. Usually that's a scam, by the way. If someone cold calls you on that. Yeah, AI was having a rough day. It's okay. We understand. Yeah, the good news is most people, like, honestly... Oh yeah, no, that's, there's those, yeah. You should also, anytime if you're a content creator, anytime you have one of those bots that pop in who's like, do you want to be famous? Just go to yada yada yada, and it'll be like the first half of the URL space the second half of the URL. What you should do is try and grab the exact verbiage for parts of that and add those to your auto mod. Because they will mix up parts of it, like the URL will usually change every so often. But if you can manage to grab like the couple sets of those words, you can knock off like 80-90% of those. Then those are especially bad when you're like in that, you know, 25, 35, maybe up to like 50 viewer range. Once you start getting bigger than that, they do start to calm down, because you're kind of big enough that you won't, like, they don't see you as a target as is. They're really trying to go after those people who you've got that little taste that you might have something going on here, but you're still working on it. All right. People asking a question to find out if they may ask a question always seems weird to you, especially since you're visibly trans and it's 90% of the time a question about probably shouldn't, just because they might want to live my life and not be an ambassador at the time. Yeah, exactly. Like, those ones, it's like, okay, you can understand why a person would do it. It's still not what they should do, but you can understand why a person would do it. I think the worst one I've had, you know, was someone being like, hey, chat, can I ask a favor? I had that one time, and I was like right on the ban button. And they're like, can you go to this other channel? I got into sorry, it was like banned. Just like right there. I was like, I see you trying to like do your own twist on this thing, but you're self-promoting. You're first time chatter, self-promoting. Banned. Nah, man. That is not how you play. You don't see like people from Nickelodeon hopping on to like Fox and being like, you should go check out Nickelodeon. There's a reason you don't do that. It's messed up, man. All right, I'm gonna take 2 seconds. I need to use the restroom in a bad way, and I need to actually eat some of this food that's sitting here. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna use the restroom. You can watch this plow for a minute. I'll still be doing stuff in the game, but I'll have like a minute or two that I'm not gonna be able to talk while I'm doing this. So I'll be back here in a minute, and thank you again for tuning in. Alright, so by now I figure we probably have our harvester sitting here completely full going, where is the drop-off? Alright, we're making good time. We're about to have the rain show up, unfortunately. And during the rain we don't want to harvest, because during the... during the rain, you take a pretty severe penalty when you're harvesting. We are about halfway through this field. So that is pretty good. Because at some time during the noon hour, we're supposed to have rain for about 1 in-game hour. Actually, we're making good enough time. Turn the speed back up. Because if we look at it, I'm down to... I've got the little field on the end that doesn't really have much problems plowing. We've got that field which has a lot of problems plowing. And I just got to clean up these edges and then do a pass of fertilizer. We're doing pretty good. All right. And let's see, what was that getting snagged by? Let's see. Yeah, I know it's a reoccurring thing that is brought up, like, about channels with, like, you know, overly ambitious moderators and all that kind of stuff. And this is in response to a comment that got auto-modded. Like, that topic comes up a lot, and I acknowledge that is a thing. But I also don't want to be a thing that whenever we're having the discussion about, like, you know, the modding and all that kind of stuff, that every single time, but some mods are too much. It's like, well, yes, we acknowledge that. But it's kind of one of those things, so you do have to understand that sometimes when you look at a bunch of those things, that the answer is kind of, it's not a person's job as being part of a demographic that maybe or maybe not you do or don't understand, or maybe not you want to learn more about, that it's not on their obligation to be that person to teach you, to help you figure that out. And I get there's kind of the difficulty of you are genuinely trying to learn more about a group, a demographic, a whatever that is going through stuff and trying to learn and inform yourself, which is an admirable thing to do. Like, very genuinely, that's good for that community, and that is a positive quality. At the same time, the issue you run into as a person in that... Alright, so I need to stop the harvester, because we'll start being penalized. But, at the same time, it is those things that those individuals, they get asked again and again, and some of the things they get asked is just wildly inappropriate as well. You know, it's kind of the, none of your business kind of stuff, that, you know, they just want to live their lives, they don't want to be a spokesman. So there is definitely that type of deal. And it is a thing. But yeah, you do... I think a better approach to it kind of thing is...
Thank you, Bernerenko, for gifting a sub to Allison_Adventures.
Thank you, Bernerenko, for gifting a tier 1 sub to Allison Adventures. I really do appreciate that. And we've been doing the whole thing about adding Lego pieces to kits. You know, add a Lego piece per sub and all that. So you're technically going to get 2 pieces, because I need 1 piece to hold the other piece in place. So we've got this little wheel thing here. And I'm going to put another peg on there. And I can put the cap to hold that in place. And so there we go. I got another little piece there. It's not much to look at yet, but they all start as not much to look at, and then they become something else. But yeah, so Alice Adventure got some nice advertisement-free viewing as well as access to the emotes. So congratulations. Alright. But yeah, so it's like cooperative Lego. But yeah, so it is one of those things. I think a better way to approach is, instead of saying, hey, can I ask you a question? A safer way of saying is, are you comfortable talking, talking about your, like what you're going through, your difficulties, whatever. And a person can be like, no, and then you're good. I find people are far more receptive of that kind of thing versus, can I ask you a question, and having no idea where we're going with that. Because usually, even I'll sit there and go, can I ask you a question? It's like, you're like, it depends. I don't have the context of where this is going. It's like, I'll usually say yes, but then, a person's like, what city do you live in? It's like, yeah, I'm not going to say that. Like, just personal safety, I'm not going to say that. I'll give people the vague, I'm in Central Florida, but it won't be like, oh yeah, I'm totes down there. Yeah, it's exactly. It's in the same realm of, we need to talk. Well, you might as well just tell me what we need to talk about, because I'm going to spend my entire day stressing out about it. And my head is going to go through every possible worst-case scenario that is probably nowhere near the reality. But yeah, now it would just be, like, it's one of those things to be like, are you comfortable talking about, like, the difficulties you deal with? Yeah, and it's also Allison saying some days you're comfortable with it, some days you're not. Like, you know, some days some news broke, you're not in a great place, and you're just like, look, man, I just want to play my games and be on my own. And there's some days that you're like, you know what? I'm angry about what's happening, and I want to talk about it. Member says, the issue of navigating circumstances that a lot of people from the majority group people feel entitled to free education, basically for minority persons, at the same time being aware that being a mod is a position of power that can be abused. Speaking as someone who modded or managed a lot of online communities, like that Discord, before Discord, I've certainly seen your share of mods seek out the position so they can be little tyrants. Oh yeah, no, there's absolutely bad mods. Like 100% there's bad mods. Renanko says, I find it very interesting how people of different culture deal with this stuff very differently. Here in Brazil, people wouldn't ask if they think you could get offended, but if they think you wouldn't, then they'd straight up ask with no hesitation. Yeah, so it's a mixed thing here that we have, unfortunately, have some people who will guise what they feign as interest to question you. So it's kind of in the same realm as like a bad faith argument where you're arguing with someone that you don't care if there's any justification on either stance or whatever. You are arguing for the sake of arguing, even if they make a valid point and you're just going to ignore them anyway. Or you're making an argument you know has no basis because you know it upsets the person. It's kind of in that realm that we have that problem. We also have people who are understandably ignorant of stuff and genuinely do want to know and help, but don't know how to go about it. And you also have individuals that, because there's such hostility they meet, that they don't want to be the spokesman. They don't want to be the person who has to, like, you know, be the PR scene for their, you know, whatever they're facing. Like, they just want to live their lives and be left in peace. And then, you know, it gets tiresome for everyone to ask them questions, and then some of them in good faith, some of them in bad faith, and all that. Now, when you get to know people better, like, it's a very different situation. Like, when you become friends with people, it's a lot easier to gauge, would this person be receptive to me asking them these questions? Or is this something that this person is having difficulty with, and while I might have a genuine interest, it's not something they really want to talk about. Oh yeah, no, the field's getting plowed wonky because the AI is really bad at it. I'll clean it up when it's done. Yeah, humans are dynamic. Both the asker and the asked could be trying to be hurtful, seeking knowledge. It depends. Yeah, and like I said, unfortunately, we have a lot of problems where people very deliberately will feign interest, and I'm not accusing anyone here of that, but they'll feign, like, innocence or whatever, and they'll try and use it as like a gotcha, look at you, you know, you're this awful person or whatever, when it's because they have different views. Like, there's no actual negative here. I mean, the negative is the person's being a dick, but, you know, the individual comes in here to be like, ha, I can prove that you're a bad person because you believe XYZ, and it's like, well, that XYZ isn't bad. You've proved something I would tell you, and we would disagree on if it's good or bad. But yeah, so it is a thing that the AI is going to do just a terrible job, and it's because this building is too close, so the AI doesn't know what to do about it. So you see it's going to pull up kind of like it did with the other one, and then it will stop, and then it's going to back off because it doesn't know that it can, like, do the turn and everything. And it'll just leave that big chunk out, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to sweep the end here. This little field is ultimately going to go away. This big field over here to my left, I'm going to go ahead and, like, take a big stripe off the end of it. Just make it not field, so that stops running into that spot. I don't know what happened with that stripe. Here, let's go check over here. Because usually when it does that, there's a log. But we have checked time and time again and not found a log, and I haven't missed this spot a bunch. There's a spot over there they missed a couple of times. But usually when you see this, there's usually a log around here that you got to deal with. But I'm not seeing a log of any kind. It won't be way back there either. It'll be somewhere around the point that they gave up dealing with it. But it could be so I shouldn't say a log. It could be any type of debris, a log, a chunk of wood. You left something in your field. But it is something that they just mess up with. Yeah, so it's not necessarily entitled to free education, but there's not a lot of places that you can learn about it if you're part of the majority group. So that's the thing. Nowadays, you can find a lot more resources if you're willing to hop onto, you know, Google and start doing your research. And I will say there is difficulty about if you want to get like first-hand responses from an individual you can have a conversation with. That I would agree there is difficulty. But at the same time, there are people who they will put up like kind of seminars. Like they're willing to be that front-end person kind of deal. But it is the kind of thing that's difficulty. Like that's kind of the thing. All right. Because just like anything, not everyone is comfortable talking about their difficulties. But like I said, if people want to genuinely educate themselves, you just have to be willing to like do the legwork, do the search versus, you know, passingly running into someone being like, "Hey, can you speak for your people?" It's like, "No, I can't. Sorry." You know, you can talk about personal experiences, maybe not. But it is a thing to I get like the may I ask you a question. Like I said, I think it's better to ask, are you comfortable talking about it? And if they say no, it's totally fair. Yep, build rapport. Because like I said, that's another thing is if you're around an individual for any meaningful amount of time, you can usually get a much better gauge. Are they someone who is or is not comfortable talking about it? Are they in a situation in the moment that they're comfortable talking about? Because even for individuals, it can change. That some days you're willing to discuss difficult topics. Other days you're like, I would really rather not. Let's see. How and when did you start to pay attention to those details on being polite and inclusive with people with disabilities or other things? As a person with disabilities, I really like that your way to approach the subject. So, very genuinely, I have been advocating for people for different capacities for a long time. And a big thing that kind of started it was coming to the realization that I had benefited from racism. And I don't mean like in the broader scope of thing, that's certainly true, but I had very individually been chosen for a position that I should not have been the one to get. And that the reason was because the other individual in question was black, and my boss had a problem with that. I didn't know that at the time. I found out later, and that was... I even saw him at times throw applications into the trash based on protected statuses. And that isn't... Oh, you just thought... No, it was. Which I did report. later on, but I don't know. But it is one of those things that was like, after the fact, the damage was done before I realized what had happened. And that bothered me in many different ways. Because, one, it undermines, like, did I actually earn this position? Do I actually deserve this position? Am I actually capable of this role? Or was I chosen just because some person had a problem? And that was one of the things that led me very into imposter syndrome. Second guessing so much. And with all that, I started to notice more and more bias, more and more problems within the industry I was working, which is tech, software development specifically, and very specifically against women in technology, that you could very clearly see, you could see a person doing 10 times the work of the other one being paid half as much because of their gender. And I wanted to do what I could to make it right. Like, I didn't like that was the way things work. I want it to be a fair system. I want to know for a fact that I earn what I get. And I want it to be fair. I want it to be when someone applies, if they're the person more capable, they get the job. But, so I started pushing back on, trying to do what I could to advocate for women in technology and all that sort of stuff, going to conference talks, and all of that kind of stuff. And as I did all that, and saw a lot of that, more and more resources were starting to become available for women in tech. They still have a lot of work to do. There's still incredible amounts of bias and prejudice and all that kind of stuff. Like, that is still very much a reality. But one of the things that is happening is they are getting a lot of resources now. They still, like I said, they got a lot of ways to work. It's still not a great situation there. But there are people working on it. But then it came to people with disabilities and neurodivergent conditions. I was noticing more and more that they both had kind of the same problem, and actually it's worse than women in tech, specifically within that area. But the resources that were going to trying to help them were far fewer and in between. That they weren't getting the same support. And I have a lot of people in my life that are individuals who deal with various disabilities, some fairly extreme, some fairly minor, and just the prejudices they deal with. And, so I kind of pivoted that way. Like, I still will advocate for women in tech and all that kind of stuff. I'll still advocate for anyone who is underrepresented and so on. But I will try and focus on one group or the other to, help out as best I can. And you just learn from talking to people in those groups when you're genuinely trying to help them. They come to you and that kind of stuff and be like, hey, here's stuff we're dealing with. Or you go to that, and, you'll have, employee, what's the word? ERGs, what is it? It's like employee resource groups. They'll be like, hey, I want to help you. What can I do? Like, what can I do as person outside your group, who's trying to do their part? I am in the demographic who is the ones causing you problems. What can I do to fight for you? And, asking those questions, and you'll learn better ways to communicate. You'll learn better ways to handle stuff. And all that kind of stuff. Like, hey, you're a group whose entire role is to represent, the people who are impacted. Like, what can I do to assist you in your efforts? Do you need me to go, when an application comes out, yell at the boss? Do you need me to go and provide educational material? Like, where can I put my efforts to help you? Let's see, work in tech. Fortunate enough, we have some of the most brilliant women you have ever met. I'm sure, hope they're being treated the way they deserve. Yeah, that was kind of the thing that got to it, is we had a bunch of women who were working for the company I had, and they were definitely the smaller number, but then the pay discrepancy was just not even remotely reasonable for doing literally the same job. Any usual arguments is like, oh, well, this person negotiated better or whatever, like whatever nonsense, but it's like, okay, but it doesn't matter. Like, this person is more capable of the job, they should be paid more. Like, it's nonsense. Like, there's all sorts of ways that things have a problem. So some of the things that they pushed for is stuff like when you get an application, hiding the name. Just straight up the name is just not included for the person who's going to be dealing with hiring and screening and all that. You just don't get to see it. Because it doesn't matter. You're not hiring someone based on their name, their heritage, or whatever. You're hiring them based on their experience and qualifications and yada yada. And that helps a lot of things. That can help against bias with age, bias with gender, bias with race. So, like, excluding the name is a strong point. Disallowing stuff like aptitude tests. Aptitude tests don't measure anything meaningful. And in a lot of cases are illegal here in the US. Now, whether or not they get enforced against is one thing, but quite often you will be in direct violation of a number of different laws if you have an aptitude test. Unless it's very specifically measuring exactly the job. Like an aptitude test that's trying to measure critical thinking, you're riding a very dangerous road. Your system will 100% be biased in a bad way, and more than likely, if you're challenged in court, you will lose. That said, if you are talking about, like, you know, this person needs to be able to lift this amount of weight to do their job, like it is a necessity, or stocking shelves, whatever, and then having a test that they need to lift that weight a number of times, that's fine. Because you're actually testing the skill that they need. But almost always, like, the aptitude test is just really a problem. Because they're proxy measurements. They never measure what you actually care about. Can the person work the job? What they measure is that a person can regurgitate, you know, riddles. Here in Germany, it's customary to have a photo on your application, which causes similar problems. Yeah, so if the company is trying to do right, that they're trying to eliminate bias and that kind of stuff, what you would do at that point is you'd have the person who receives those applications, when it comes to passing that off to, like, a hiring manager or whoever,
Take a sip. What's the worst that could happen?
or, you know, like the team lead or whoever's going to be the one who's actually going to be, like, interviewing, screening, whatever, they remove that picture. So it's fine that it comes in with a picture, but you immediately take it off. Physical aptitudes are okay, but cognitive tests, the physical, again, so even a cognitive test, it's fine if you are directly measuring the thing that is relevant. Not IQ, not logic. Those are proxy measurements that don't mean anything. That are heavily contested to completely useless at best. But if I'm specifically measuring, can this person, like, if one of the main job roles is, can you put a formula into Excel that does X, Y, Z? Having a test that checks that specific thing can be okay, if it is done properly. But that is testing a very narrow, specific skill. The broader, is this person combative? Is this person aggressive? Is this person intelligent? Do they have good critical thinking skills? Those tests are not like I said, in the US, you are most likely breaking the law. Yeah, JD's kind of on the thing that when it comes to stuff like IQ tests, that kind of stuff, more often you're just checking to see, did they get the same, the same style education that you are measuring as IQ, versus did they get something that's a bit more of an alternative or an outlier, where the way you phrase a question will be different between the two, and that kind of thing. A lot of times when you're talking like IQ tests, they end up being ableist, because a lot of times the way they perform the test will make it more difficult to pass if you have like a visual impairment, a reading difficulty kind of thing, a thing that is relevant to like certain physical limitations, like your ability to use mouse and keyboard, which, since the IQ is supposed to be measuring intelligence, none of these other limitations should be measured as part of that. you know, if I have essential tremor, which is where you know, it's similar to Parkinson's disease where you get like the shake. That shouldn't be a measure in my IQ test because those are unrelated. They're completely not anything. Like, you know, having essential tremor would potentially be something that would be a consideration if I was doing a job where my penmanship was relevant. There's not many of those jobs. Like, that would be a specific job that would be a difficulty. That would potentially actually preclude me from consideration for the job, because that specific disability does make it difficult for me to perform that specific job. But if my job isn't that, I also wouldn't necessarily agree it's debunked on the individual versus the broader scope. It's still a proxy measurement. Anytime you're dealing with a proxy measurement, you have to accept it as flawed to begin with, and it may or may not align with reality, but you do know already you should not trust that measurement. And what I mean by proxy measurement is you're not actually measuring the thing you care about, you're measuring something that implies the thing you care about. So like, did someone get a good education? Well, I could sit down and give them a bunch of math questions. Did I actually measure, did they get a good education? No. For one, what the heck is a good education? Like, what am I actually caring about here? But two, you're asking me math. You're not measuring how I'm doing at, like, broad education. You're asking me math. Just math, specifically math. And that's the kind of thing. Like, is someone a good employee? There isn't, I can't hold a thermometer up to your head and go, by Jove, this person has 18 points of employability. That's excellent. That is a very high number. We don't have that. You can't hold up a device to someone's forehead and be like, ah, this person has an IQ of 836. Man, they're the smartest person who's ever lived. It's off the charts. No, we sit them down with a test and be like, yo, regurgitate a bunch of random information that may or may not align with intelligence. The OG mod is saying, the shocking amount of tests you applied for asked you to do a EQI, emotional intelligence. Yeah, and even though I agree with what they're attempting to accomplish, I would have great difficulty. Like, I would probably, at the moment they gave me that, I'd be like, you know, hey, I advocate for people with disabilities and neurodivergent conditions, and on principle, I refuse to fill out this, because while I do agree emotional intelligence is very important, and you want people to be, you know, empathetic and aware and yada yada, very clearly I try to strive for these things. At the same time, what a lot of those tests do end up screening for is stuff like autism. Because the way they're performing those tests tend not to work well for individuals with certain neurodivergent conditions, regardless of their actual emotional intelligence or whatever. And then a lot of times the way they perform those is where they ask you a bunch of written questions in a, you know, an internet browser, and a lot of those websites don't work with screen readers, which means you've also very weirdly screened against people who have, you know, visual impairments, which has nothing to do with that. So I do agree with what they're trying to do in principle. Unfortunately, the reality is we do not have a way where it doesn't in itself create a whole pile of other issues, because you can't directly measure how aware and empathetic someone is. You can just measure things that imply it and hope for the best. Okay, it's still moving. Let's see, every time you hear someone say emotional intelligence test, you think of testing a person by making them watch Marley and Me, and then measure how much that person cried. Not too much, not too little. Did they play The Walking Dead by Telltale Games, did they get to the ending and cry? If the answer is no, they have failed. No, I'm teasing. Don't definitely don't do something like that. There's a whole big pile of reasons that's wrong. But also, maybe stop and consider yourself if you didn't bawl at the end of that game and you played it. Because that game was definitely one of those games that said, hey, have you ever wanted to hurt? Like, just really intrinsically hurt on the inside in a very well-written way? We can provide that. We can give you the full Pixar experience of just making you just really, really internally die a little with how much it hurts. We can give you the Up experience, but at the end. Because Up is speedrunning, making your entire audience bawl. No, it's a fun fact. Let's see. I think the figure reasoning approaching IQ testing, I believe, was originally made to deliberately screen for autism. That wouldn't surprise me. I actually don't know where it comes from. I know with the autism thing, that's where the thing Asperger's come from, which has been stricken from the DSM-5. Which, for those who don't know what that is, that's a document being like, it kind of outlines what are recognized medical, DSM-5. Thank you. That are like medically recognized conditions. What are their symptoms, and that regarding mental health and all that kind of stuff. But that includes both stuff like disabilities as well as all sorts of things, like neurodivergent conditions often fall in there. The whole mess. But it helps with like diagnosis and all that kind of stuff. But it used to be a separate condition, was Asperger's got added to there way later, and then it got stricken from there as we've learned more about autism to realize that it is not an accurate measurement of it, and its history is literally Nazis. And I don't mean people who are kind of Nazis, I mean literally swastikas, Third Reich Nazis. We're talking literally during extermination camp kind of things. So, we've decided it's probably not something to keep around. That mayhaps that is not necessarily the best. It's also a reason why you'll notice they're stopping using high and low functioning autism as well, because it's kind of the same problem, where it doesn't accurately represent it, and worse off, it implies one is like, oh no, those are the okay ones, and these are the bad ones, and that's not accurate either, because it's, this one has this symptom is higher, versus that one, that symptom is lower, despite them having a whole bunch of other symptoms. That's the reason it's it's labeled as a spectrum now. Because you have your handful of symptoms, and everyone's going to be a little bit different on there. Let's see, the discussion about some tests reminds you of, there are 3 kinds of lies. Lies, damned lies, and statistics. Yeah. Statistics do have value, but you can absolutely manipulate stuff with the statistics. Yeah, the DSM does have issues. Part of that's, though, just keeping up with stuff. By its very nature, it's usually, because it has a whole, approval process and everything it goes through, that takes a little while to catch up. Yeah, you can lie with statistics. You can take statistics, and you can massage them enough that they're technically right, and imply the opposite of reality. Like, very, very famously, if you want to go back, we won't even bother, we won't say, what political party was involved, or any of, the policies that led to it. Just, a scenario and an outcome. That there was a point that we were changing how public school worked here in the United States. That there were a number of individuals who could not attend public schools with the same resources and all that kind of stuff. That a lot of them just didn't have access to schools. And that was fixed. There was things done to correct that. I shouldn't say fixed. It was greatly improved. So more people were able to attend public schools than we had ever had before. And the most expected outcome of that would be, of course, you know, a whole bunch of people, like you'd see a whole bunch of people performing way better and grades would improve and yada, yada, yada. But when we looked at the statistics at the end, grades bombed. Like, the overall grades for the entire country were measurably down. And if you look at it from that, you said, oh my god, we clearly need to reverse this policy. This is terrible. The reality was you had tons and tons and tons of people who couldn't go to school, so didn't have grades. Now we're getting an education. So if you went to each and every separate demographic, the grades were up. But because there was a very large number of people who were being entered in that, you know, generally underperformed before because of a lack of accessibility and everything, even though the grades GPA was up for that demographic because of how much larger that demographic got, it made the total grades for the entire country come down on average. So it's 100% across the board a good thing, but the presentation of the data without breaking it down into those little bits made it look awful. Like, made it look like a complete and utter failure, when in the reality was entirely the opposite. And we don't need to go into what policy it is, because it's not even about the policies. Because then it becomes an issue about the policy, so much as the statistic was not collected in a meaningful way, and therefore gave misleading results. Where is this a new feature? It's new in the sense that you can announce it. It's not new in the sense about, you know, it keeping that data. But thank you for the 3 streams, catching the last 3 streams without any miss, so I really do appreciate that. Like the standard issue helmets in the military that says the number of head injuries were higher. These are a bad idea. What do you mean the number of fatalities are down? Exactly. Right, they were conflating, they were taking what needed to be broken down into smaller bits and trying to mash it into one large statistic. Makes a misleading thing. And that happens with a number of stuff. Okay, so I need to detach that. How are you doing? Alright, you still got a little ways to go. Because now I need to start fertilizing some fields. And a Night Dweller on their 15 stream streak. Getting those points, so congrats on those points. Alright, so I hope there's a lot of fertilizer still in there. No, there is not. In case anyone is keeping score, there is definitely not much fertilizer in this thing. So I do think we're going to end up having to dip into our greenhouse goods to sell again. To fertilize everything. That's fine. We're going to get literally a field that is like half the size of everything we have as extra income, so we're going to lose ourselves like $10,000 worth of greenhouse stuff. And we're not going to lose it. We're going to actually probably lose like $3,000-$4,000 of potential profit because it'll be selling at a bad price versus a good price. But on the other end of it, the thing I'm going to gain is like $40,000 worth of sorghum. So, you know, lose a couple $1,000s here, gain $40,000 on the other side. Clearly that was a mistake. Alright, so I can get 3 of these. 4 of those, actually. Alright, okay, solid fertilizer. That's probably not going to be enough for every... Did you take my money and not give it to me? That's the second time that's... Oh, it didn't take my money. Oh, I think it just canceled out. Okay. I had the other day, I went to buy seeds, and it took my money, and it just... Oh, I'm looking at the wrong place. Wait. What? This is dumb. I see what's happening here. So this, I was assuming, is my total up here. I'm like, okay, 5,700. Makes sense. It's not including the first one. So we look at this. My price is 0. I want to make this clear. My amount is 0 up here because this is an option. My option of getting a second box is 1,920. What garbage? Okay. Farming sim devs. Your UI here needs some love. Your UI here needs some love. This is fine down here. This is not an option. This is a quantity. Change your UI on this screen. This is a quantity. This is not an option. It is a quantity. Yeah, that's definitely a UI. Yeah, like, it's not one of those things I'm like, okay, I see how that happened. They had a UI, and they went, oh, we need to be able to buy more of these, and they took their existing UI and bolted it on. Versus that would require implementation of a change in the UI. It's not a big deal. You can, like, it's not one of those things that you hit the UI and you're like, oh crap, we're stuck, like, I can't get past this, you know, UI busted, you know, soft lock or anything. It's just like, okay, it is a confusing UI. So actually, like, when you report UI problems on the dev side, like you have QA, that is, like, we break it up where it's like, okay, this is broken UI, like, you cannot use it, so this function is inaccessible, and, like, that's your biggest one. It's like, hey, this is broken, like, this is non-functional, it needs to be fixed. Then you have stuff like confusing UI, which is, okay, it works, but trying to figure out what's happening here is a little not great. All right. And then you have, you know, stuff like, you know, incorrect label, stuff like that, which is, you know, that's usually like your smallest fish. That's like, okay, like, the UI is not confusing, it works, but when you look at this, like, it's clearly not right. You know, that's like your lowest not caring. Then we have Dwarf Fortress UI, where the info is there, but people can't find it. Yeah, it's the obtuse UI. And again, like, Dwarf Fortress is not a bad game, but its UI needs love. Its UI needs love. I know that's a thing people hear all the time, that it's a tired argument, but it does. I think it's an amazing, like, I want the UI to get a good refresh so I can go back and play it and not be frustrated just interacting with it. Because it seems like an amazing game, but man, is it obtuse. Let's see, a UI for an app My Company where you select an item you don't want to be selected. Oh yeah, that would be put under confusing UI. That would, like, if your QA department's any good, that would be a failure. Now granted, it could be your QA department reported it and then nothing got done. That's a totally different thing. That's not a failure on QA, that's a failure on a lot of other things. But if the QA didn't flag that, nah, they should have. Just because a user can figure it out doesn't mean it's not confusing. Like, very genuinely, when you do good user tests, you sit someone down with your game, your application, whatever, and you don't say anything, you don't lead them. You know, here are the things I want you to achieve, and you sit back and watch. And if the user has to ask a question that isn't defining the goal, you know, they ask a question like, how do I do this? Or you start seeing them clicking in places that aren't related to what you're trying to do, you take note of it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you change anything, because if you have, like, out of 1,000 viewers or users, only like 5 click over this other place, you're probably fine. But if the commonality is you have the person open the application and you start seeing them click on every single button because they can't figure out where to do the thing that you want to do is, that is where you take a red mark and go, okay, we have a problem. Like, our UI has a problem that I have asked the user to do this task, and they have to just hunt. They have to search and destroy, look for it. Yeah, there's lots of different ways. Like, it can be a thing that if you have iconography, that the iconography isn't clear, or is it like universal kind of thing. It can be one of those things that the terms you're using to be descriptive about it aren't clear. It can be that you've taken something and the way you've nested it into your application isn't particularly great either. Will you do this if I tell you to? Oh, excellent. Because I need to eat my food. I keep putting this off and it's going to be sad. But yes, it's a whole thing. So I'm going to take 2 seconds to eat some food real fast. I'm going to mute the mic so you don't have to hear me crunching away or anything like that. But I got to eat my dinner. And meanwhile, we're going to watch a field be fertilized. And we're going to do all this. And I'll be back here in a moment. I haven't done anything to deliberately not allow it. Is it because it's an animated emote you're not able to, or is there something I need to do on my end? Yeah, and I've lost track of what's being said between there. Like actually, if you want to give an example of like UI and user testing, so when Microsoft switched, Word, Excel, and all that stuff to the ribbon, it was reviled. Like, people were upset about it. And they had an approach that the approach was not bad. The approach was literally what they did is they were collecting analytics to see who would click like where and that kind of thing, just like frequency, like how many people clicked on this button, how many people clicked on that button, those kind of things. And so the things that people tended to need more and find more, they made larger. Whereas things that people were like far more nuanced, far less frequently used, they made smaller or even hid from the front end. And it actually came to the point that was like when Microsoft really started collecting analytics, was leading into making that over time they actually found that there was functions that they had people maintaining for Word and those that were used like 1 or 2 times in the entirety of a year. So they just axed them because like 2 people in the entire world using a function, why are we paying someone to maintain it for that giant, that giant of a customer base? But and it was a thing that when Ribbon first came out, like people hated it. Nowadays, whenever they try to make a change to the ribbon, that in itself becomes the problem. I see an issue here, so stop. I missed a spot. Yeah, I got you, Infinity. Oh, we need to go back over here. But yeah, and don't get me wrong, like people hate change. But like it was one of those things that over time it just made things better and better as time went on. Yeah, I've lost track of that conversation. But yeah, no, it's like, and to their credit, like it reduced maintaining a bunch of features people weren't using. There were features that they didn't realize people were using nearly as heavily that they put a lot more effort into improving. Dude says, man, when Microsoft changes things because we want to tweak it up, and they take stuff out that a lot of people use just because they wanted to do something different, you will find Microsoft is a very methodical company. They don't just change stuff arbitrarily. Just to be 100% clear, someone who has worked with Microsoft very directly many times. Like, I've actually sat down with their engineers working on projects. They don't just, yeah, we feel like doing something different. Like, before they plan to do anything, there are meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings and discussions and pros and cons and all sorts of stuff that goes into it. They don't touch anything without being able to back it up with a whole lot of data and numbers. And that said, do people hate change? Yes. Yes, they do. But the one thing they definitely don't do is make change just to make change. If they make change, there's a big reason for it. It might be a legal reason, or they've got a huge amount of data supporting it, or whatever. And there are times they make changes that they really do need to make that they know people are going to hate. Because there is a very important reason they're making that change. There's also times they make changes that are unpopular that they reverse. I'm not saying they don't. Like, it's not all good news. But it is definitely not that they just fly by the seat of their pants. If anything, a lot of the engineers over at Microsoft get super frustrated. Windows 10 first release is a good example of that. Change to make change. Sorry, or the data, like... Windows 10 was the one? Well, no. Windows 8 was the one where they went with the, Oh, man, I forgot what they called the UI. But it was designed to do, like, tablet all that. Oh, yeah, that was the thing. Everything at that time, all of the data was supporting that more and more and more people are going to be going to tablets, tablets, phones, and all that. Like, that was, by and large, all the statistics were going that way. I mean, we were having, like, in the industry, we were having more and more stuff going, okay, like, it's going to be a thing that people are going to be doing their daily, word processing on what's effectively a glorified iPad. Like, that's just the way the world is going. And we had to adapt. Oh, they're live tiles. That was what it was. It was live tiles. I actually like the live tile functionality. I don't think it's appropriate for desktop applications. But for, like, phone apps, I thought live tiles are great. And we sort of got a halfway to the live tile things with Android over time and a little bit less to the iPhone. Because it was, if you remember before that, your applications on your phones and all that, they were just static images. It's just a 32-bit by 32-bit image or whatever the pixels were. And then later on, they started doing stuff like, oh, we should have this where you can see, like, the subject line on this little cube on your desktop or whatever. So you get a little bit more information. Alright, so I got a problem here. Where I gotta sell some stuff. Sorry, man. I need to take you away from that, because I need to sell some produce, because we're about to run out of money. It's why, there was a huge Blizzard fiasco. Do you mean... I'm sorry, I'm not sure which fiasco we're talking about. Blizzard's had plenty of them. Like, some their fault, some not really their fault. Oh, yeah. When Blizzard went to the mobile thing. Well, yeah, I mean, but that's the thing. Like, so much of gaming so far is economics, yeah. Even today, like, a lot of the big money makers for gaming are mobile. I'm not saying I want the next Diablo or whatever on the phone. But yeah, that was the whole leader. Like, the whole thing is they're seeing more and more game time going onto phones, more and more game time going onto tablets. That a lot of the companies were genuinely feeling threatened that if they didn't get on board, that was going to be a problem. Plus, in actual dollars and money, the games, like the mobile games now, were making a killing compared to what their desktop games were. So, like, you understand as a business why that was happening. Missing those greenhouses now? Well, that's where we're heading right now, is going to the greenhouses. I just had to deal with dropping off the flour and then moving the bread. Alright. That's the issue. The stats lied to them. See, that's it. I wouldn't even say the stats lied to Blizzard. I would say they had an absence of information. That, yes, mobile gaming is huge, it's making so much more money, and everything else going on. The issue was, people wanted Diablo to have a major update forever, and it kept being delayed, and kept being delayed, and kept being delayed as a thing. And they finally got one announced, and the one that got announced was a mobile game. If Blizzard had come out and said, hey, here is Diablo 4, and by the way, we're also going to have a mobile game as well, they would have been seen as, like, amazing, like, look how wonderful Blizzard was. It was the fact that it effectively teased an entire PC industry, like a PC IP forever with a mobile game that just really put people over the edge. Yeah, so that was the thing. They had good data about the mobile and the money to be made and all that, but they didn't consider the impact on the fact that their existing market had always been PC for Diablo and only PC, and a lot of those people weren't looking for a mobile game. I would argue it is more the absence of a PC sequel at the time was why it just upset people, because it felt very bait and switch. It felt like you were finally getting that thing you've been waiting for so long, and then someone handed you something completely different and said, you're going to like this, right? And so very understandably, the expectation was one way, and what you got was something totally different. If they had announced both at the same time, it probably wouldn't have been that big a deal. But they didn't. Yeah, so they had incomplete statistics, is what I would argue. They had incomplete information. And it's you can understand them making that mistake. The only way I could see them doing way better about it is, you know, user surveys and all that kind of stuff. But the problem is with those user surveys, if they would have done it, you know, they would have let the cat out of the bag about what they were looking at. It also could have been, though, they got those surveyed, like, results that they had, you know, Diablo 3 had just launched, and like, oh, we should make a mobile game. And they may have surveyed people around that time, asking them if they would like a mobile Diablo, and they're like, oh yeah, Diablo 3 just came out, it just got a major update, yeah, we'd love a mobile game. That'd be great, we just, you know, Diablo everywhere. But then, you know, it took them 2, 3, 4 years to make the game or whatever, and by the time it circled back, like, they're like, no, I want my game. Give me my next version. Yeah, no, that is a problem. You do have executives that say, we know better than the players. And there's a balance you gotta do there. You can't listen to everything your players ask you. Oh, right, I need the harvester to go the other way to not miss. It's fine. Like, you can't just run entirely on your user submitted data. You do have to do some effort to quantify and sanitize it, because you'll have people ask you for all sorts of stuff that makes no sense. But you also can't ignore it. You gotta definitely take it into heavy consideration. So when we run out of money, yep, the AI The AI stopped working. They said, I am not working unless I'm being paid. And good for you, AI. Don't run on those IOUs. Hey, when you work and you don't get paid, you quit. And then you go and file a, then you go around and you turn around and you file, lost wages. And go, my employer owes me this money. Hey, farm's doing pretty good. We got our giant sorghum field we're in the middle of harvesting. We ran out of money and our worker quit on us. I mean, they just stopped their contract or whatever, which is entirely appropriate. Yeah, so take this load and we'll sell it. And that should give us enough money to get our workers back to work. I still need to collect grass for the sheep. They're getting very low. I need to get water for the sheep. They're getting very low. I need to finish fertilizing the fields, but we're making pretty good time. We've got the field down here has already been fertilized. The field over there is about a third of the way. The two small fields won't take us any time at all. And that field doesn't get fertilized yet. Like, the field back there, I actually have a long time to get the work done before I have to plant again. Oh, put it up on 2 wheels. 3 wheels. When do I have to deal with the replanting the sorghum? Oh, not till April. Yeah, it's a shame. There's just not a good crop for going with that. Do you make sweaters? Not yet, but you can actually have it so the workers will not the workers. You can actually get the production line for making clothing. Like nice high quality wool clothing. It's a very lucrative production line from what I recall. Did you know most farm workers aren't able to get blood for 5 years after working at a farm? I assume it's something that they could potentially be exposed to, kind of thing. That type of deal. Because I know there's a whole bunch of those that, you know, some of the rules make sense and some of the rules are absolute garbage. About, like, you can't donate blood if XYZ. Like, you know, if your iron's too low, sure, that's a problem. Versus, like, you know, if you were ever at, you know, at a point in this place or whatever, it's like, yeah, no, that doesn't matter. You can give blood 5 years after anti-malaria pills you took in the military? Probably makes sense. Probably allergic reaction or allergen or something like that concerns would be my guess. Or something like that, that there's something in that, you know, can be problematic. You know, for the person getting them. Like, you know, when you get them, you'd have the person there who knows what they're receiving and yada yada, versus if you get a blood donation and suddenly the person starts having this bad reaction to it and you're trying to figure out what the heck was in the blood. Could cause issues with other antibiotics? That's possible too. But yeah, so that's what I'm assuming, is there's some side effect of that. Would be, I assume, the reason why they're not allowed to do that. Yeah, some of those, it's one of those things like how long should it normally expect? You're gonna put it much longer because of that. It could also be one of those things that, like, it's a medication that, you know, gets stored in fat cells or whatever, so it stays a lot longer than, you know, other medications or whatever. I'd assume it's got to be something like that. Muscle or fat cells or something is where it ends up getting put, just because if it was something shorter, you know, wouldn't stick around long enough to be as effective or whatever. Because just based on what's being described, it doesn't sound like a vaccine. It sounds like it's a different kind of thing. All right. Okay. So let's go. Hormones like HDR get stored for quite a long time, but still haven't ever heard of anything going up to a year or more. Yeah, it's probably one of those things that, you know, it's probably one of those things that's stored that maybe we don't know how long it's going to be there, so they, you know, they pad out the time, or under certain circumstances it can be abnormally long, so you pad out the time. I can see reasons why you'd do that. Like, that kind of thing makes sense to me, versus there were other rules around, you know, you're not allowed to donate blood with XYZ. It's like, have you been to this country, like, ever, where you're not allowed to donate? It's like, well, yeah, oh, it's because they had an infection of this disease 30 years ago. It's like, okay, well, why don't you just say, hey, only if you were there between these years? And they've gotten better. There's a bunch of stuff that used to be on there that would make you ineligible to donate blood. They've gotten rid of over the years because it didn't matter. Wifey.
It's time for me to go to bed, guys.
You go to sleepy sleeps?
I hope so.
I mean, it would be good if you are going to bed to sleep that you'd actually get to the sleep part.
Yeah, that's ideal.
That does seem like a reasonable thing for the outcome of that activity to be.
Hi, the very last Largoon. Hi, Luxray. Hi, Allison Adventures.
I have sheeps.
But they're cute, not like your deformed cow.
I still tell you, that is a photorealistic cow in Coral Island. Chad has backed me up on this. It is 100% without question a photorealistic cow. Just because they're not your weird California cows that are all deformed and strange.
Hilarious star. No, you're all gaslighting me. I know what cows look like. Anyway, I love you.
I love you more.
You have a good night.
You have a good night.
I know what cows look like. I could be.
The thing in terms of disease is, it makes more sense to have very low quarantine periods, especially viruses that in general that could sometimes have very long or just unpredictable incubation. Yeah. Like, I'm willing to accept it. It's like one of those things that you just run into a problem where they're like, oh, like, we're desperately low on, you know, this blood type. They're like, look, okay, well, you're very, very cautious about this thing, and that's fine. But in the scenario that people are not going to make it because you're so incredibly low on this, that some of these things that are more cautionary, that don't really match up with a bunch of stuff, maybe that's not a big deal. Alright, so we'll stop that. We can take this, drop off our last bit of sorghum into our trailer, and then that'll be this all harvard. There's also it's also dangerous to overstay quarantine. We need immune system working. It needs practice. So, yes and no. You're going to still be exposed to germs and viruses in your own home. Like, the assumption that if we stay at home, we are not exposed to germs is not correct. Your sink is basically the world's most terrifying petri dish of germs ever. That sponge by your sink is absolutely terrifying. So it's one of those things. Now, there's obviously, should we be in quarantine forever? Well, the answer is clearly no. But at the same time, I don't want people to sit there and be like, you know, like make all this ammunition to be like, oh, we should never quarantine, or quarantine for more than a week is useless, or whatever. Like, you definitely don't want to. There's definitely a balance in there when there's like something new that we don't understand, that's dangerous, that we're still figuring out. You want people to take precautions to be like, yeah, let's step back. Like, we can prevent this from getting worse. We can slow down the exponential growth until, you know, we have either a treatment method or a cure, if, you know, relevant, or a vaccine or whatever. That, you know, there's that balance you got to keep. At the same time, you know, yeah, you don't want, like, you can't realistically quarantine for 30 years or something like that. But yeah. Melmeasure says, you're thinking quarantine as in blood donation? Only in the previous comment. Though isolating people from others physically is a bit more complicated decision issue. Yeah, and it's never truly, truly separated. But yeah, no, like, the quarantining blood kind of thing, I don't think that matters at all with, like, immune system exercise. Because it's not like your immune system is a muscle that you got to exercise to keep it up. Like, you're not realistically going to ever stop your body being from bombarded with germs. Not unless you're, you know, getting into, like, the whole you are in a controlled, sealed environment kind of thing. And you still get germs with that, but you can mitigate the vast majority of them. But, like, I mean, your body is full of germs at all times. You actually have germs that are good for your body too. They don't just go away. If they do, you have serious problems, especially around your digestion. Your digestion really depends on various germs and bacteria to function. That if you wipe that out, you have serious health problems that will absolutely kill you. Yeah, without germs, you die. There isn't, you'll be sick. You die. I just remembered I need to fertilize the other fields. You're under the weight requirements? I didn't realize there were weight requirements. Because I was super light and skinny in high school. That must... Is that a new thing? Because I weighed like genuinely nothing. I was a stick in high school. Yeah, no, that's I was saying that's why you got to be good and careful when you're doing a procedure that kills germs. Yeah, when you have those procedures that they have to like wipe out a bunch of germs, like they have to really go for it, because whatever the procedure is going to like obliterate your immune system. Like that's where they have to be like super careful. Like they do it and they can manage it, but it is the thing there's a lot of juggle that goes in there. Alright, so that needs to be repaired and gassed up. That needs repaired and gassed up. What else was it worth? Right, I needed to give the sheep more water. You got weight requirements now? There may have been, like before. I just don't remember that being a thing. And I know I donated blood in high school when I was super duper light. But the immune system is more like an antivirus firm, the software type. If such a company stopped researching new viruses for several years, it would certainly be a problem. Same with bioviruses. For several years, it'd be a problem. People don't get exposed to seasonal variant of flu for several years. It'd be quite dangerous. That's why Corona H1N1 is particularly scary. A lot of people just haven't been exposed to that type of strain in several decades. Gotcha. Yeah. It's also one of those things you want to be careful about. People will take the messaging around that the wrong way and be like, oh, let me just go get my kids and go expose them to, you know, this virus. I need to make sure they're getting sick every year. Forgetting the fact that, you know, that virus still kills people. Let's see, when you're in high school, you're told that you were underweight for the school donating blood. Going on to actual blood bank is okay. Like, okay, so there, yeah, so it's probably just some extra precaution the school had put on that wasn't necessarily medically founded, or maybe they were a little bit stricter than the blood bank kind of thing. I could see that being a thing, that the school had put an additional safety guidance rule, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, no, you're definitely right that every year colds and flus and all that do mutate. But then the counter argument you could have is if we were separating people out, the amount of mutations that would happen would drop, because you get an additional more mutations happen, the more the virus, survives, spreads, and multiplies. So if you reduce it, you're also reducing the number of variant strains that you run into. So I would definitely not lean towards the more people need to get sick, it's necessary, or, if, spending too much time separated is going to kill you either. Like, theory on the, philosophy kind of thing, sure, you're not, the logic isn't unfounded. But I think for practical terms, because you don't get exposed to every flu every year. Like, those kind of things. Like, hopefully you don't. Maybe if you're a doctor, you might. But, that's... Every time you get it, there's a little bit of a risk of it going wrong. So you don't want to, just pile them on and... it's a classic. Okay, you roll a dice, it's got 100 sides. If you roll a 1, you die. The other 99, you're fine. You don't want to keep rolling that dice. Sure, it's a low odds, but you don't want to just roll that dice all day. Sooner or later, you're going to find the 1. So it is definitely one of those things that I don't agree with the idea of okay, you need to not protect yourself from exposure from stuff because of this. Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of sicknesses that you don't recover from. And also, if you're getting the vaccines, you're already getting your exposure to a variety of strains as they advance. Like, if you get your regular flu vaccine, you've already been exposed to, they're dead versions of the virus, or if they're the mRNA style viruses or vaccines, you're getting, exposed to, getting exposed to the protein that it uses to attack. The virus isn't there, it's just, you have the virus, it's got its payload, it's got all its nasty gross in it, and what happens is you have a protein, and what that protein does is that's how it actually latches onto your cell to inject that payload into your cell. And what you're doing is you're miming that protein on the very end, the thing that it uses to attack you, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, nowadays we have a vaccine for that. So we don't do the nonsense anymore where you're gotta take the kids out to get them exposed to those chicken pox. Go get, the neighborhood kids sick. Let's go ahead and get everyone over there. That used to be the strategy, and I understand there was some logic behind it, but now we just have a vaccine. Honestly, we've had a vaccine for a pretty long time. I missed the vaccine age-wise by a little bit. And I got chickenpox and all that. Which, granted, my parents didn't do the thing where they're yeah. Well, that's the whole idea, is if we go with that logic about, well, you gotta expose yourself. It's if you're getting your vaccines, congratulations, you're exposing yourself to the latest. That's literally the argument for vaccines as a preventative. If you expose yourself to the latest version of each strain you expect to be around, that's what a vaccine is. It's effectively a dead version of that virus, or the protein from the virus that, again, doesn't hold the nasty. It's just the hook that it tries to grab your cell with. Those kind of things. That's 100% the argument for a vaccination. Because I'd rather get a dud version of the virus put in me than the actual virus put in me. Because then I can exercise my my immune system with no risk. Well, very, very low risk. It's never no risk, but the risk is pretty insignificant. Outside of people who have, you know, certain allergies and that kind of stuff, the likelihood of you having a proper adverse reaction is not super high. Way lower than complications from the actual thing. Oh, I did plow that last field. I gotta do that. Yeah, one of those allergic types? Yeah, it happens. And by all means, if you're someone who has an allergy, don't get the vaccines. Because it's usually, the one I usually hear is egg allergy. Is the big one. That they use stuff that is derived from eggs to bind it. Alright, I get to plow one more field. But we're doing good. We got that fully harvested. I've got 3 of the fields plowed and fertilized. I got 1 last field to plow and then fertilize. And then we're good there. But you're fine with eggs, but you cannot have chicken without a reaction. But somehow the eggs are precaution on vaccines. It affects you? Interesting. Could be a quantity kind of thing that they pull whatever protein or whatever out of the eggs that you don't react because it's not in a high enough concentration for a singular egg or whatever like that. But then, you know, with the vaccine, it's in a slightly higher concentration than it would be found in an egg, but it's in that high concentration in chicken or yada yada. I don't know. That's just me guessing. Is whatever the thing that the reaction, like the chemical inside of it that is causing the reaction is at a higher rate than an egg kind of thing. Because that's like people are lactose intolerant. Some can have like the tiniest bit of lactose and it's totally chill, but then, you know, once they get over a certain amount, then you get an adverse reaction. The very last Sardine says, I'm not allergic to anything they know of, and you're very thankful for that. Yeah, same here. I have a couple things that I might have an allergy to, like grass pollen. But I've only ever had when I have grass pollen and I'm around water, like chlorinated water, that kind of stuff. The combination of that, I react badly to. But grass pollen without it, not a big deal. So I take it as like I have an allergy to grass pollen, but it needs the water to get it to where it needs to be to cause me a problem. That's my guess. I've never consulted a doctor on it. I just know the times that I've had like incredibly bad reactions as a kid, that was the combination, was swimming in the pool and then playing out in the yard. Like, in one of those two sequences. And it'd always be on my legs, which is another reason why I figured grass pollen, because it would make sense. Your legs are kicking through the grass. Alright, I'm going to finish my food here real fast with this plows this field. I'm going to kill the mic while I'm doing it, and I'll be right back. I figured I might as well grab my next drink because I'm about to finish this one right away versus like, you know, having 2 sips of drink and then turning around and getting a new one. Has they have experimented with those hose DLC for this game? I have not. That was the only one that didn't come with like the season passes and all that. I believe that DLC, and then then there's like 1 or 2 of the brand specific DLCs are the only ones I didn't get. Yeah, there was like 2 tractors with the Agi one, and those are the only ones I'm missing. Was there was like one that was just a couple of tractors, and the other one was the hoses. So I was curious. My assumption with the hoses one was that you would use it for something like hooking up a hose to your water source, and you could just hook it like directly to your granary, or not granary, your greenhouses, and you just like push the button, and it would just pump the water in, or something like that. Or you could park your water truck and like just hook it to. So I have no idea. My assumption had to do with like moving stuff around, or you can do the whole thing where you build like the frame. That's There was a lot of people talking about. A lot of people want there to be, or are expecting there to be, Farm Sim 2025 is to be the new one, is what a lot of people are guessing. We have no basis where anyone has actually said that is a thing, but Giant Software, that's usually the pattern. So that would mean we basically have, a whole like either the end of this year or next year would be where like the next Farm Sim drops, would be the guess. And so people are talking about, like, what would you like to see in the next Farm Sim? And some people talked about having, like, you could buy the over your farm structure. To have it, like, just existing there that you would spray. So you'd have your tractors and everything you go under, but you'd have that over the top structure for all that. There were some people like, I want to have to water my crops. I'm like, oh, please don't. I would agree. I would like there to be some things you have to deal with, like pests or whatever. Like you get some type of like mildew into your farm, you've got to spray to get rid of, or you'd have like different types of like various basic pests in your farm that you could sit there and use like pesticides to deal with them, or you'd have like the option of like for certain pests you could buy like the ladybug boxes or whatever. You'd have a couple different solutions for dealing with the pests. There was talk about a neat feature that might be a fun one, is to make your world feel more alive, you could have events. So you'd have like an event that, there's a wheat shortage, so, this particular year wheat's going to be particularly valuable compared to what normally is. Or at the same time, there could be a wheat surplus where, this particular year, either way more people were, growing wheat or whatever, so the price of wheat is worse than normal. Those kind of things. And it could also be a thing that maybe as you play that you can cause the local market to be adjusted, those kind of things. So it could be, if I'm sitting here and I've got 8 entire tiles dedicated to just wheat, that I would individually drive down the wheat prices. So it's one of those things that like kind of pressures you into wanting to diversify your stuff. Hey FG, how's it going? I was saying you should double check. You have the AGI DLC. I don't know. Was free. I didn't have it because you got the big bundle and almost missed out. Yeah, I can look at it. Yeah, basically a basically have something like a more dynamic market. Yeah, it could also just be, so after you get in the 3 streak, so thank you. It also is probably one of those ones that could also be you didn't miss it. Sometimes they just get reset. I've had people who I know didn't miss a stream. They were talking to all of them, and then their streak reset. It's just, it's a beta feature that's a little buggy. But yeah, and that's the idea, like making the market more dynamic. And of course, all those things should have like the toggle on off if you don't want it. But those would all be kind of fun things. You know, there's also always the more crops. I've mentioned a few times the style of crops I would like to see added to the game is I would like us to get some tree crop. So whether it's like citrus tree or nut tree or whatever, like any and all of the above would be totally fine by me. But stuff that you'd plant it and you'd plant it with the hope of getting money like a year or 2 or 3 down the road, like some period of time later. So it'd be a very delayed payout kind of thing, but very, very lucrative if you wait that long. It also requires very different machinery than we currently have. Like for a lot of the nut trees, they'd have your same thing. You'd have a similar thing to what we have in the game where you plant the poplar trees, but it would be for, like walnuts or whatever, pecans. And that machine would be basically the same. But when you'd get to later on, what you'd end up doing is you would have your rows of trees and you have a machine you drive between the trees and it grabs the trunk of the tree and it just shakes it. And all the nuts fall down. It's got a glorified broom on the back that just kind of pushes it all into a pile in the middle. And so, then you'd go in with, like, basically a foraging wagon kind of thing that'd scoop up all the nuts, get the dirt free from them and all that. And then you'd just take that out to sell. So it could kind of use a little bit of our existing equipment while also having its own unique equipment. That'd be very different. Now, granted, I do think it might run into the same problem you run into some of the things like the olives and the grapes where, we've got those in the game, but they're not the most fun because of how the machinery works. I still need to do those myself, but everyone I've seen who's used them is like, yeah, they're not a good time. They did like 2 or 3 harvests and went, never mind. Yeah. I mean, I'm still going to do the grapes and the olives at some point to at least try it. But there's definitely some things that even, no matter what you do, are very laborious in the game. I also like the idea of them adding a lot more vintage stuff. So my understanding is the reason we get a lot of the modern tractors is for all these companies, that's what they want to show off. That's kind of part of the partnership between Farming Sim is that, yeah, you can use our actual name brand new tractors in your game. But they don't really put much in the way of the vintage stuff because they don't want to, excite people or encourage that kind of thing. But that'd be a fun thing is to get a bunch of like old-timey stuff that, you could start with these runs where you're depending very heavily on really antiquated equipment that's, nowhere near as scalable as the stuff we've got now. But it give you an early game option of having some, having just like the one wedge you just drag behind something. Man, AI, you are certainly an interesting approach to everything. Not saying a good one, but an interesting one. Because you could have just turned and then dropped it and gone with it. Instead, you added like 3 extra turns onto this, and you're driving halfway up the field to start it. Where are you going, man? Oh, now we're going to back up. We're going to back up the whole way, or we're going to go stop halfway in the field. Yeah, no, that was, we talked about that the other day. I would like a mode that reminds you of what Game Dev Tycoon did with the whole game dev thing. Where, you start, like, in the 80s or whatever and you work your way forward. But with, with the farm stuff, you'd go way far in that. Should I buy a horse for $1,000 or save $6,000 and use this 2-stroke tractor? Yeah. Like, that would be fun to me. Would be, like, getting some really old-timey, it's not even gasoline tractor. It's this coal tractor that they boil, like, it's got a boiler on it. And it, has a whopping, like, half horsepower, something to it. Start plowing with a stick. But yeah, no, that would honestly be all right. Let's go ahead and take over for the AI. All right, JD, you have a good lurk. Thank you for lurking. But yeah, no, that would honestly be a lot of interest to me. Is like you'd start out, you know, you'd have like a steam boiler coal tractor. You'd still probably very heavily depend on, you know, your horses to do a lot of your manual labor. Like, you know, you get the plow that's drug behind, you know, an ox or a horse or whatever to just handle plowing your field. But, you know, you'd play, and it'd be, you know, compressed time or whatever, so it doesn't take literally hundreds of years. But a little while would pass, and then you might be able to unlock getting, you know, a better steam boiler style tractor, and then over time you'd move from steam to you'd get your very early, like, you know, diesel style tractors that could do a little bit. You'd probably actually have electric in there too in the middle. Because if you remember, the very first like cars and all that were electric. They weren't gasoline. But you know, those kind of things, you'd have the adaptions and all that. But you'd have some way you'd progress the eras or whatever. Because I think that'd be a lot of fun, is like slowly over the course of what would be in, you know, the equivalent of real life decades, so far as, you know, the time passing in game. You just slowly watch the tech advance. Because it also, like right now, one of the complaints is there's the field stones that a lot of people just turn them off. I would kind of want it to start where, like, you could start, and depending on your map, you might have a map that, like, the field stones are really bad when you start. It's very rocky soil. But then as you work the fields more and more, and you clean up the stones more and more, you gradually get less and less rocky till you basically get nearly no field stones. Never truly no field stones, but it'd be like very trivial concern. Because over time you have gotten rid of most of that junk out of your field. Because I think that's part of the thing that's so unsatisfying about field stones, is you can never really make your field better. There you are. Is the A gonna be okay, Rolf? I mean, I'm doing this right now myself. I'm just cleaning it up. Alright. So let's take this back. And I gotta fertilize the field. And then I'm looking at our things, don't mind me. I know, but maybe one day you won't have to. Yeah. Alright. Yeah, and the reason I want to fertilize the field now is I am going to have to seed that field. In-game tomorrow, and then do another pass at the fertilizer. The good news is I think the AI will be able to handle fertilizing the field okay. Yeah, it should be relatively easy to add a stone layer that gets depleted over time. Yeah, exactly. And it could even be your strategy that when you get a brand new field that you just, while you're working the other fields, you just sit there with one of your workers and just say, hey, go like de-stone this field for a while. And then turn around and have do it again and again and again to like just basically spend ridiculous amounts of time prepping the soil to begin with. So that way things are much better on the other side. You don't have to sit there and, you know, worry about too much. Did our music stop? What happened with that? Hey. We'll try the turning it off and on again. I was like, man, it's getting quiet music-wise. What happened? I guess, like, Pretzel had an issue or something. Okay, seems to be working now. Alright. Maybe. Don't make a liar of me. There we go. Ugh. Oh, yes, it stopped autoplaying. It was working for me most of the stream. I just had it just hiccup right now. It's been working most of the stream. I think it just had like a little snafu. You had to manually advance every song. Oh, that's awful. Alice Adventures, it is a DMCA safe music player. So the idea is you can play the music here, and while I do still separate my music onto its own VOD because it still sometimes accidentally gets flagged and muted, that generally speaking, you know you're not in violation of DMCA, so you're just kind of safe with that. We had the whole conversation earlier today about, you know, I try to not break, you know, DMCA. It's not the only service that provides that kind of functionality, but it is one. It's the one I use. Alright. So yeah, the reason I'm having the AI do this is I can't see what's happening because it's night. So chat, I know I normally have like an extra hour left on stream. I'm gonna wrap up this field. I might end up early. Something is really not agreeing with my stomach all of a sudden. And I know what I could do to alleviate that, but it's gonna take a little while. So it's probably gonna be one of those things that I'll end up just raiding out to someone, dealing with what I gotta deal with my end. It's a thing I deal with as a stomach issue. Usually it doesn't flare up very often. But like, it just decided to kick in suddenly, so I gotta deal with it. It usually takes me a good 15-20 minutes to get it to settle down, so that long towards the latter half of stream. Well, like towards the last like hour of stream or so, you know, it's just one of those things. I'm like, all right, if I'm gonna have to step away for like 20 minutes of the last, you know, hour of stream, maybe just listen to my body. It's nothing serious. It's a stomach issue I've had for a long time. But it's pretty rare it caused me an issue. I think the entire time of the stream it's only been like 2-3 times. But I would say I'm gonna actually advance the day so I can see what the heck is going on. Like, we'll see. Usually it does get worse. We'll see. Does it get tons done? Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it'll be a thing. I'll probably be feeling better in like 45 minutes or so. Like once I do what I gotta do, which I won't go into the details because no one wants to know that. It'll be good. Alright, so we're in pretty good shape. Just to kind of cover, it did give you water and everything. How do I want to go screenshot-wise? Yeah, we'll just screenshot it like this for the thing later. But yeah, so it's been a very productive day. We harvested all the sorghum. We finished harvesting all the wheat. We have plowed the fields. We fertilized the fields the first time. I need to plant the fields today in game for the like for, you know, the wheat and all that kind of good stuff. I'll double check the bakery. So yeah, so this shouldn't be hard for me to figure out. Like, I just think of like, okay, normally I leave myself as hints to like, you know, ADHD that I can go back and say like, oh, my tractor has got this tool and is facing this field. I understand. Actually, that's almost a perfect thing to do. So what I could do, so I remember what the heck we're doing, I could ditch that, start this. I will grab the seeder and the seeder and the extension, and I'll just park it on the field with the seeder there, and it won't be hard to figure out. Yeah, so you have the split track unless they do live takedown. Maybe not heard of that. So normally what happens is 99.9% of the time, if you're gonna get any type of thing, it's you get your VOD muted for having the music on your main track. You are still potentially violating DMCA if you're using copywritten music. But the only way you get caught with that is if someone were to actually report you for having that music, which they can do, and you can get your account suspended. The odds are pretty negligible. But if you were, if you're playing just AC/DC or whatever, and someone reported, came after you kind of thing, reported you for DMCA violation, you in practicality you could be reported, but it's not a normal concern. Those streams are going. Now I'm gonna be wrapping up in a minute. I just want to get this in position, so that way when I start stream next on this game, I can see that, oh, I was about to seed the field. Because ADHD things, I'll come back and be like, what was I doing? What's going on? And I need to not miss this. So we'll just park you right here. And that means next time I'll pop in and go, where is the blue tractor? Ah, it's sitting there on the field with the seeds in it, ready to rock and roll. Because that's my strategy of dealing with ADHD stuff is I put the thing I need to do in the way. Because if I need to mail something out and I put a big box in front of the door I need to leave my home, I'm not going to miss it. So that's my workaround. So with all that said, my stomach is getting pretty upset, so I'm going to go deal with that. But before we go, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream over on TikTok and YouTube, so don't forget to do the stuff over on YouTube and all that kind of stuff, so you can find me back here in the future. And goodbye, TikTok.